Member states are on board.
The French president made very clear yesterday that he was open to extend sanctions to coal and oil. We will see what the position of the other member states will be.
Le Maire went on to say the efficiency of sanctions is directly linked to the unity of the EU's 27 member states. Inez de la Cuetara, ABC News, Paris.
City News Time 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The average high about 8 degrees will be above that today with the high near 12. We'll have a bit of sunshine to start, then the clouds will increase. And then tonight we'll get back into a little bit of clearing. The wind, though, will be quite brisk out of the east-northeast. Tonight, 2 degrees for the low. Tomorrow, chance of showers, a brisk east wind, and up to 14. For today, the high, 12.
And right now it's 2 degrees in Ottawa, 1 degree in Smiths Falls. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the province is able to manage what he calls a little spike in COVID-19 cases. Hospitalizations of people with COVID did jump 30% on Monday. That was week-over-week comparison. Now, one Ottawa doctor is adding her voice to bring back COVID-19 restrictions after she recently tested positive for the virus. Here's City News reporter Perushka Gobalkista.
Dr. Neely Kaplan-Murth is urging leaders to reintroduce some of the health mandates, such as wearing a mask indoors and isolating for 10 days if people are showing COVID symptoms. Dr. Kaplan-Murth posted on Twitter over the weekend that she tested positive for the virus, which has forced her to cancel in-person appointments at her clinic for approximately the next 2 weeks. Over the last week, she says she's got many calls from patients who have tested positive for COVID and says that even people with 3 doses are still getting sick. She expressed frustration that political leaders and local public health officials are not doing enough to protect people, especially with the lack of PCR testing, not having enough time to isolate, and now with the lifted restrictions. Perushka Gopalkista, City News.
City News Time 9:02. It may be this afternoon before about 2,500 people get their power back. Hydro Ottawa says an outage is through Chapel Hill South. It stretches Innis along Paget and past Renault Road. Hydro Ottawa says crews are responding. They hope to have all the power back by about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez and the Justice Minister David Lametti are preparing to reintroduce a bill in Parliament that will tackle online harm. An expert in online child protection is feeling optimistic. A panel advising the ministers about combating online harm can develop a plan to protect minors from sexual exploitation on the internet. Canadian Centre for Child Protection Executive Director Leanna MacDonald says there is an urgent need for a way to force tech companies to swiftly remove any indecent images of children as reports of victimization just keep on rising. And Britain has unveiled plans to regulate some cryptocurrencies as part of a broader plan to become a global hub for digital payment. It comes as authorities in the United States and Europe race to draw up rules for crypto. The British Treasury said today that it's going to work with the Royal Mint now to create a digital collectible or an NFT. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's now or never. Kind of a theme for today. It's now or never. Just past 9 o'clock, so it's now. Time for the Rob Snow Show on City News. Welcome to it. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning. Coming up, farmers are so often forgotten when it comes to the federal budget, even though Canada's agri-food system is one of Canada's largest and most important industries. It's worth $140 billion worth of economic activity every year, and 1 in 9 Canadian jobs is related to agriculture. It's big. And look, food and food prices all over the news, right? Commodity prices. They're strong because of supply shortages, because of the war in Ukraine. But at the same time, input costs are way up for the farmers. The carbon tax is not the farmer's friend. Fuel, feed, Fertilizer costs all up, and our planting season is about to begin across the country. So what are farmers hoping for in the federal budget? Because maybe if the government could give the farmers a break, maybe we could all get a break, even just a tiny break from the rising cost of living. Keith Currie is a farmer. He also happens to be vice president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. And he's going to join us coming up here on the Rob Snow Show. As well, housing. Housing, $837,000 for a house in Ottawa. Average sale price in February. The March number should be out either today or later this week from the Ottawa Real Estate Board. But housing and housing affordability. Expect some news on that in the budget. The housing affordability crisis. There have been news reports that the government is plotting something that would ease the crushing burden of sky-high housing costs. So what should it be looking at? Dean Tester started a group called Make Housing Affordable. And he's coming up in a few minutes from now. He's been on City News before, and he has said in the past there is a housing crisis in Canada, and he thinks the politicians are making it worse. Well, here's a chance for a politician to try and make it better. Chrystia Freeland is her name, Minister of Finance. What should she be looking at? The Globe and Mail, this is extraordinary kind of stuff. The Globe and Mail, for example, had a report yesterday about how one of the Liberal government's major plans and programs to help people, young people especially, buy homes, has been a total failure. The Shared Equity Mortgage Providers Fund, $100 million program, approved $17 million in applications and paid out a measly $1.3 million. From a $100 million program, paid out $1.3 million. $1.3 million might get you a very modest home in the 416 area code. Maybe. No guarantee. So, I mean, that government program, that's a dud. That is a dud. Whatever it was supposed to accomplish, it's been a dumpster fire. So hopefully they'll come up with something better than that, which was always a goofy idea anyway. Basically had the government becoming part owner of your house by covering some of the upstart costs of getting into a mortgage. So the government had equity in your house. And if you sold the house, you had to pay the government back since it owned part of your house. So just a failure of a program. Dispersing 1% of the funding. So anyway, that's coming up. The professor is with us every Tuesday morning, the poor professor from the Glebe. Ian Lee, Associate Professor of Management at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. And we're going to talk about climate change and the economy. That is major for us this morning and throughout the morning. We're going to get into the weeds of this latest report from the IPCC. I know you love them. Our friends at the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's now or never. David, it's now or never. Remember this day. This is the day that I told you. It's now or never. April 5th of 2022. Okay. I told you that was going to be a theme today. The IPCC, in its latest report on climate change, says it's now or never. And that means emissions from greenhouse gases must peak. Oh, not 10 years from now, 20 years from now. 3 years. 3 years. That's it. By the year 2025. Emissions have to peak by then, and then, boom, 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 drop like a stone. Somehow, some way, we must get to net zero 25 years later. By the year 2050, net zero. We put a ton of carbon into the atmosphere, got to suck it out somewhere else. Net zero. And that's the climate target in this country now. And that means we have to electrify everything. Every building in Canada has to be electrified. Every vehicle has to be an electric vehicle. Well, probably will be an electric vehicle by then. By 2050, I would think so. But can the grid... How many times have people called me and asked me this? I say, I don't know. Can the grid take care of this kind of load? Can it handle that kind of load? You electrify every building, every vehicle? No. Right, not now anyway. That's the answer, according to, I have to say, just some fine reporting this morning from Canadian press. Like, must read stuff about the investment that would be needed in the range of $100 billion. They're likening it to building the Canadian Pacific Railway, a nation-building project. That's what it would take to electrify the country and have a grid that can handle it. So, yeah, we're going to talk about all of this in a big, big way, not only with the professor, but also with the leader of the Green Party of Ontario, Mike Schreiner, the MPP for the riding of Guelph. And the Green Party is basically saying, wake up, it's now or never. Okay. And here's our plan to electrify Ontario. Syndicated columnist Michael Taube is going to join us. We're going to talk about this Conservative Party leadership race news. Leslyn Lewis, eh? So what if it costs $300,000 to run for the leadership of the Conservative Party? I need to raise $300,000? No problem. Done. Just like that. The first to do it. And, you know, it's no secret. She is, most say, she is the flag bearer for the social conservative wing of the Conservative Party and had no problem raising $300,000. What does that mean? So we'll ask Michael about that and Poilievomania, Pierromania. What are we calling this thing? Does it have a name? The movement. Someone has to slap a name on this thing. Have you heard any names? No? Yeah, it's hard to name. But an interesting take in the Toronto Star. They're calling it in the Star Bitcoin populism. It's Bitcoin populism. I don't know. Do they mean that as like is that a shot? It's Bitcoin populism. The writers seem to make the case that the key to Poilievre's popularity right now is that he is reaching what the writers call locked out millennials. They feel locked out of prosperity, locked out of buying homes, locked out of the middle class. And Pierre Poilievre, he's their guy with his Bitcoin populism. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's more to it than that. We'll ask Michael what he thinks, and we'll do the Talkback Hour. We always do the Talkback Hour. Every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock this morning, I have to get your take on this latest dire warning from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. 3 years, that's it. It's now or never. It's now or never. Emissions of greenhouse gases have to peak within 3 years, or we are going to be living in a whole world of pain. Unlivable. That's the word that was in one of the news stories I read this morning. The world will be unlivable. And it means big changes for you, for me. We have to change the way we live, our lifestyle, the kind of house you may want to live in. Hey, where you live. Think you can live in the suburbs? You can't live in the suburbs anymore. And drive downtown? No. You have to intensify, density, electrify. Have to change what you drive. Maybe you shouldn't be driving at all. And what you eat. Of course. What you eat. Avocado toast for everyone. Because it's now or never. So are you a now person? Or a never person? I'm never doing that. Now or never? Next on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
My name is Tamara Rudenko Karalambi. I'm a member of the Ukrainian Orthodox Parish here, and I'm also a member of the Ukrainian Women's Association of Canada, Ottawa branch. Today, we are here to prepare for tomorrow's workshop, the Ukrainian Easter egg decorating workshop. Ukrainian Easter egg decorating is a beautiful art, and it is something that has been passed on through the generations. Ukrainian Easter eggs are known as pisanki, and these wonderful chicken eggs are transformed into a little piece of personal art. Pisanki are symbols of life, are something that go back 2,000 years, and the symbols that were used at that time were elements that represented health, prosperity, fertility. So these are really important to us to celebrate today as we are moving into spring and celebrating the coming of spring. We want to take the opportunity to practice this tradition, which is very typical of the changing of the season from winter to spring. They also symbolize protection. And in today's world, it is very important for us to protect our planet, to protect our values of freedom and democracy. And these wonderful little pisanki are symbols of hope and symbols of peace. So the mantra is peace, pisankas for peace, and pisankas for protection. The more we can write, the more eggs we decorate, the stronger our spirit is, and we are sending those messages of goodwill to Ukraine, where people are struggling with a horrific Russian invasion. They are struggling to protect their land, struggling to protect their families, and we believe that this gesture, which may be a moment of light, brings hope to people, not only here in Ottawa and our own families, but across the lands and across the ocean to a much needed country.
Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Budget day is Thursday, federal budget day, Thursday. Housing is reported to be a major focus in making housing more affordable. Music, I would imagine, to my next guest's ears. Dean Tester is with a group called Make Housing Affordable. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, nice to hear from you. What do you think of these reports that housing will be in focus for the finance minister when she delivers the speech on Thursday?
Well, Rob, the best analogy I can give is, we have a housing crisis in this country. The house is on fire and the Liberals are standing at the sink doing dishes. So they've correctly identified the problem, but they're doing absolutely nothing resembling a solution right now. They're very much tinkering at the edges with tax credits and cash handouts, but they're doing nothing to address the root cause, the big problem we have in this country, which is we just aren't building nearly enough housing. Canada ranks dead last in housing units per capita in the G7. Ontario is the leading driver of that problem. In the city of Ottawa, what that means is we need to build 72,000 units overnight to be an average city. We build less than 10,000 a year. We're a decade behind. We're so far behind where we need to be, and that's why prices have doubled in the past 5 years. That's why first-time home buyers are struggling to get into the market, and giving them a tax credit isn't going to fix that.
Okay. What do you think the federal government can do? When I look at, for example, your group's website, Make Housing Affordable, you pin a lot of the blame on municipalities and some of the decisions made at the local level. What can the federal government do?
Yeah, so the federal government doesn't have a lot of formal responsibilities when it comes to housing, but they do give the provinces and municipalities a lot of money. So they definitely have negotiating power. What I'd like to see the federal government do is start going in and saying, if we're funding your huge transit project like the LRT, we want to make sure that housing is actually getting built near those transit stations. We want to make sure that infrastructure is directed to support denser communities. So, it doesn't make sense to build an LRT in a station in a community that's, single family homes and spread out and everybody has two cars. You want to build projects with apartment buildings and condo buildings and townhouses and bigger complexes. You need to build that density around transit. That's the most impactful thing the federal government can do is start saying to municipalities, you need to actually build cities. You cannot just give in to not in my backyard campaigns. We need to actually build housing in this country.
Okay, this was from Scotiabank Economics in its primer for the budget. Affordability housing in particular is expected to be a central plank of the budget. Election pledges laid out $17 billion over 5 years in new spending for housing affordability measures, including $4 billion for a housing accelerator fund and $3.5 billion for a tax-free first home savings account. Recall the Liberals had set a target to build or repair 1.4 million new homes over 4 years. The agreement likely adds a couple of billion in near term to this priority, including extending the Rapid Housing Initiative and topping up the Canada Housing Benefit. So, there are lots of programs here. Housing Accelerator Fund, tax-free first home savings account, Canada Housing Benefit, Rapid Housing Initiative. How effective are any of these programs?
Yeah, so I want to separate two things here. Okay. Some of that money is directed towards affordable housing or social housing, which is desperately needed. Mm-hmm. We have a huge backlog here in the city of Ottawa. I know in my backyard there's community housing that has a wait list of 5 years plus for people. And these are people who are either homeless or minimum wage or on disability who need government support to get housing. And I think that's really good. And I wish we were doing more of it. So I'm glad to see investment in that. But on the other piece, a tax credit for first-time home buyers or a tax-free savings account, in theory, it's a good idea. It's the premise is let's equalize the market for first-time home buyers who have been, unfairly punished and have not reaped the benefits that existing home buyers do. But when you don't build enough housing, yes, all that really does is, someone like me trying to get my first house, well, if I got an extra $5,000 through a tax credit, for example, well, so does everybody else I'm bidding against. So you're just driving the price up for everybody. You're not actually helping the affordability piece because the demand is so high. When I'm bidding against 20 other people for every house that I'm bidding on, that doesn't actually solve any problem. You're not
doing anything on the supply side. What you're doing is juicing up the demand in a supply-starved market already, right?
Yeah.
You have first-time home buyers, and they're up bumping into the same people all the time.
Yeah, and I can tell you, like, the last house I put a bid on was a 40-year-old condo in Canada. It was listed at $350,000, and it sold for $575,000. That's a 40-year-old condo. Things are
40-year-old condo. Right, a condo.
That's right. There were $400 condo fees on top of that mortgage price. So, that's the reality of what first-time home buyers are facing right now, trying to get in the market. A tax credit isn't going to cut it. We need huge change, and it needs to come fast.
Okay. Huge change looking like what?
Well, I think there needs to be a commitment to get housing built. I think that's absolutely number one. Addressing the supply issue head on is the most impactful thing we can do.
All right. You don't sound hopeful.
Well, I have been hopeful. I looked at the Housing Affordability Task Force that the province ordered.
Yes.
That was full of great ideas, and I thought that would have got us 90% of where we need to go. Unfortunately, the provincial government backed down on a lot of those ideas. They felt they were too controversial going into an election.
Got a lot of pushback from the municipality as well. Here in Ottawa, it did anyway. Many of the measures.
I was at that planning committee where the city of Ottawa debated it, and you could tell city council they just weren't ready for it. But it needs to happen. I mean, that's where it needs to go. You see that happening in other jurisdictions. New Zealand's brought an end to exclusionary zoning across their entire country. You see states in the U.S. starting to adopt policies like that. And I think there's a stubborn, begrudging acknowledgement from most city councillors that that's where it needs to go. But they don't want to be seen as the ones who do it because it's a hard political choice. Right? Nobody wants to make the hard choices, especially with an election coming up.
Yeah.
But that's where we're at. We need to make it happen.
Okay. Thank you for this morning and sharing your thoughts on it. All the best.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, bye-bye. Dean Tester with a local group here. I have a side gig of his, Make Housing Affordable. Coming up right after the news, it's now or never, says the IPCC. And what would it take to electrify everything? We'll talk about both of those issues with the professor, Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. This is City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, April 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 5 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. The speech Ukraine's president plans to deliver at the UN Security Council today expected to be rich in symbolism, ultimately not do much to change the civilian deaths in his country. More grisly evidence emerging of massacres in areas that Russian forces recently pulled from, such as Bucha, where journalists have counted dozens of corpses in civilian clothing and seen a mass grave in a churchyard with bones and bodies wrapped in plastic. President Zelensky says his forces desperately need more powerful weaponry, some of which the West has been reluctant to hand over. Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez and the Justice Minister David Lametti preparing to introduce a bill in Parliament that will tackle online harm. This is actually a reintroduction. An expert in online child protection is feeling optimistic. The panel advising the ministers about combating online harm can develop a plan to protect minors from sexual exploitation on the internet. And a Petawawa couple out over $100,000 after the latest fraud. Details on that coming up for you at 10 o'clock. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
He is Associate Professor of Management at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. He's also the poor professor from the Glebe, and he's also with us every Tuesday. Ian Lee is back on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob, and full. I drive a Honda. A 4-cylinder Honda that's 12 years old. Yeah, I'm not one of these, I don't drive the, 3 cars on the avenues in the Glebe, one electric car to signal how virtuous you are, and then 2 big honking SUVs, you know what I mean? Right. I don't do that.
Okay.
I'm too poor to own 3 cars.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about climate change and the push to electrify everything with the good professor this morning. It's now or never. It's now or never. That's what the new IPCC report says about the fight against climate change. It's now or never, and it says greenhouse gas emissions must peak in just 3 years. 3 years by the year 2025. Our lifestyle must change. You can't drive that Honda Civic much longer. The way we build buildings, the way, electrification, what we eat, where we live, carbon emissions from all of these activities, all the activities of modern living must peak by the year 2025, or we face an unlivable world. What do you think about that assessment?
If you go back to the first IPCC report or the second, they were not so apocalyptic. By the way, I don't deny global warming. Of course, global warming is real. What I do object to, and I'm very much in the same camp as an environmentalist by the name of Björn Lomborg, who's a Swede, who's also cross-appointed at Stanford. He's a professor. He's published on this extensively. He says climate change is very real. Yeah, he says we got to mitigate it. I agree with that. I agree with that too, by the way. And he supports a carbon tax. So there's now what I want to get to, what I disagree with. This idea, we're all going to die. We're all going to die in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We can quibble over which date, which environmentalist is projecting, but it's nonsense. The IPCC said this in the first report. They said the hottest parts of the world now will become uninhabitable. I don't dispute that. And that's properties, countries, and people living near or on the equator. I've been to Dubai in the past, and Dubai is breaking 50 degrees centigrade in the summer. So places like that are going to become uninhabitable. Parts of the world. IPCC and the alarmists are trying to suggest, but they're very careful not to actually suggest that. I don't mean the 15-year-old girl from, I think it's Sweden. I'm talking the official agencies. They imply that it's Armageddon, we're all going to die. They don't actually come out and say it. And yet when you look and drill down into the data, it's very, very clear, and it just confirms what people understand, is that if you're in a cold part of the world, well, it's not suddenly going to jump 100 degrees or 50 degrees. So if you're living in northern Canada or Siberia or other cold places, it's going to get warmer. I'm not suggesting it's not going to get warmer, but the idea that we're, quote, all going to die, 7.7 billion on planet Earth right now, is just, it's grotesque exaggeration. That's my first issue.
Right.
The second problem, and here's the real kicker, okay? And this is empirical again.
All right.
If these environmentalists were really serious, which I believe they're not.
You don't believe they are? Wow.
I don't believe they are serious about solving the problem because you immediately Google, and anybody at home or on your cell phone can do this, Google top GHG emissions by country 2022. Who shows up at number one, by far and away number one ahead of everybody else? China.
Right.
Do you hear one single environmentalist say, look, we got to go after the low-hanging fruit? China is producing more than any other country in the world, almost 30%, which is about a third of the world out of 200 countries. Do you hear them going after? They say, no, we got to go after Canada. Canada is a rounding error. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything. Right. We're 1.5% of global emissions.
Well, we're going to do stuff. We're going to do big things.
I mean, to put it really colorfully, let's say, horrible thought, let's say some asteroids came in and through the atmosphere and smacked into Canada, several parts of Canada, and every last living, breathing human being in Canada died. 38 million disappeared.
Right.
In other words, our 1.5% global emissions would vanish because we're no longer here.
Yeah.
What impact would that have on global emissions? Well, 1.5% of the world's total is a rounding error in statistics. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do something. What I'm saying is where they're going wrong, and I really do believe they are going wrong, because they're not going to get everybody to say, okay, that's it. I'm not going to heat my house. I'm going to stop eating food because, after all, we use a lot of fossil fuels to make agricultural food products. Yeah. So I'm going to stop eating my house, and instead I'm going to go and wait into my house and wait till I die.
Well, it's going to be electrified. It's going to be electrified.
Well, now we go to the third point.
Yeah.
If you look at the lead times necessary to electrify, to rebuild the grid is going to take years and years and years and years because the grid doesn't have the capacity. It's built to the current level of demand. They're talking tripling, quintupling, or higher the total amount of electricity consumed. I'm not against that. I'm saying anybody who thinks you just flick a switch and presto, abracadabra, you go from the amount of energy delivered now, which is 20% of the total energy used is electricity, and we go from 20% to 100%, you just flick a switch.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. We've got to build, by my count, looking at Natural Resources Canada estimates of the energy produced by oil and gas, that's the equivalent of about 200 nuclear power stations. Does anybody think we're going to build those in 6 months?
Well, environmentalists argue you should. Environmentalists don't even like nuclear power.
No.
Stephen Guilbeault doesn't like nuclear power. But look, let me read you a story. I sent this to you this morning out of Calgary, Dateline Calgary, from the Canadian Press. Okay, This is a really, really dynamite report from the Canadian Press. Okay, a price tag in the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, and a projected scope akin to that of the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway in the 1800s. That's the scale of the investment in Canada's electricity grid, experts say will be required in the near future. In the near future, as the phase-out of fossil fuel-fired power generation combined with a rapid increase in demand for electricity puts never-before-seen demands on this country's electrical grid. Hundreds of billions of dollars.
Now, let me tell you, I don't agree with that report.
You don't agree with it?
No, I don't.
What do you mean?
Royal Bank, the former editor of the Globe and Mail, very reputable man, went to the Royal Bank as their senior vice president in terms of social environmental issues.
Yeah.
They did a huge study over 2 years, and they estimate it's a minimum of $2 trillion.
Just for Canada?
For Canada alone. The number by the Woods Energy Consulting Company in the States, which does a lot of environmental consulting, estimates that the U.S. to decarbonize between 5 to 7 trillion U.S. dollars. The The UK did a study just last year, a very reputable study, one of the major consulting firms working with the government, and they estimated somewhere between 3 to 4 trillion pounds, which is 6 or 7 trillion Canadian dollars. People are grotesquely underestimating the cost of decarbonization because they grotesquely underestimate how dependent we are on oil and gas. And the way I like to put it in ways that we all understand, just about every hospital and every school, public school, high school, university, college building is heated by natural gas. Just about every high-rise you see in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Ottawa, anywhere you see a big, tall, high-rise building everywhere, the chances are very, very high that it's being heated with natural gas. And so to come back to the electricity issue, to increase the grid, the Canadian Electricity Association, which is all the provincial crown corporations like Ontario Hydro, which are really pro-environment, pro-green, pro-going electric. If you read the reports buried in there, they say the grid is not even remotely close to ready. Because to increase the capacity of the electricity by 4, 5, 6-fold, 6 times, you've got to rebuild every wire going down every street. And everywhere where there's an electricity wire, wherever you look out your window and you see hydroelectricity poles, they have to be upgraded because you can't pump out 6 or 7 times as much electricity down the wires that are not designed to carry 6 or 7 times as much. That's going to take years and years and years and years to A, build the nuclear power plants, or millions more solar panels and windmills, and then you've got to rewire the grid, and then you have to rewire every house in Canada that uses oil, propane, or natural gas, which is about 80% of all the homes, and there's 15 million homes in Canada. Now, that's about 12 million homes use oil, natural gas, propane. Does anybody think that there's enough electricians around to rewire every house, 12 million houses in Canada, in the next 24, 36 months? So when you bring it down from we're all going to die, flapping around at 35,000 feet or 50,000 feet, and you come down to earth and say, okay, what does that mean?
What would we have to do?
What do we have to do?
Right,
and then you realize how preposterous are these demands that we got to do it in 36
preposterous?
months.
Well, challenging. Challenge.
No, it's not a challenge. It's not physically possible.
You think it's just impossible? Pie in the sky. They're full of it.
I'm saying in 36 months or 5 years or 7 years.
Okay.
I'm saying it can be done over a period, and I've seen other estimates of about 50 years. Because the country is 8,500, 8,800 kilometers long. Okay, we've got to rewire the grid completely. We've got to rewire all the houses, 12 million houses. And set aside the houses, all those high-rise buildings, hundreds of thousands of them, 50-story buildings, 30-story buildings, 70-story buildings.
Yeah, 5-story walk-ups, whatever, right?
Every floor, every last room on every floor, whether it's a condo high-rise, an apartment rental high-rise, or an office building high-rise, they have to rip out the walls, or the ceilings, I guess, that's where they put the wires, I should say, and they've got to rewire every room, every floor of every building. Now, yes, it can be done, and for anyone who says, Ian Lee says it can't be done, I never said that. What I said was you can't do it in 3 years. You can't do it in 5 years. I've seen estimates of roughly 50 years because we're talking rebuilding the totality of the infrastructure of Canada and, for that matter, the U.S. and all the other countries of the world. There aren't enough electricians and workers to do all that in 36 months or 5 years or 10 years, and the cost is going to be in the trillions, not billions.
I thought the $100 billion was an eye-popping figure. You're thinking take that and,
that's not even a down payment.
A factor of 10. Okay.
That's not even a down payment.
Oh, holy smokes. Okay. Well... Maybe it'll be in the budget. Maybe it'll be in the budget on Thursday.
Very quickly, before you go to break, let me throw another metric at you to bring it down to earth. The cost of one new nuclear power plant, the most recent one being built in the world, is in France. And there's been a royal commission or whatever they call a court commission into it. It's now at 20 billion euros, one nuclear power plant. And it's been estimated if we build a brand new one in Canada, it'll be between 20 and 30 billion Canadian dollars. That's one plant. One.
Okay. All right. When we come back,
many more than one.
Okay. I want to ask you what you're expecting from the budget. on Thursday. And if you're with Bill Robson over at the C.D. Howe Institute, who says you have the Bank of Canada, which is trying to tighten things up, and meantime you have the government of Canada seems to be throwing money from helicopters to use an old line. So when we come back with Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School at Carleton, this is City News.
The Centre of Excellence in Frailty-Informed Care at Pearly Health conducts applied research that focuses on the development of best practices. And really, the goal of the Centre of Excellence is to optimize care and quality of life for older adults living with frailty.
Well, yeah, and that comes to the latest research when it comes to adults living with frailty, older adults, as you said. What is some of the latest research that you've seen?
Yeah, so we're really proud of a recent study that's coming out of the Centre of Excellence focusing on our CME Understanding Frailty Together program. So CME is an approach to caring for older adults living with frailty, and it really focuses on the assessment and management of frailty in long-term care. So what's really unique about the program is that it was developed in long-term care and it's designed for long-term care. It really focuses on early and transparent communication with families and with residents so that they really have a good understanding of the health status of their loved one and then can make decisions about their care and their future goals of care in that context of frailty, understanding what those risks are of a particular intervention or course of treatment.
Danielle, when we say frailty, what exactly do we mean by that?
Yeah, so frailty is a medical condition. It leads to a decline in function and health. And people that are more severely frail are more susceptible to large declines in their health. So if they do suffer from a minor illness, they're less able to cope with that illness, and they're more subject to rapid declines in their overall health.
When it comes to sort of interventions, you know, I guess there's some are more invasive, some are less invasive. I know you're obviously, you know, looking at the less invasive, but what exactly do we mean by that? Like, can you give us an idea of some of those invasive interventions that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, so the CME program revolves around, again, assessing the risks of particular interventions. So someone who is frail, let's say, and has a fall, you know, one of the courses of treatment could be going to the hospital. But someone who's very frail needs to understand, and their families need to understand, what the implications of going to the hospital could be for someone who has that level of frailty. So the CME program helps them understand those risks and take into account really their values and their preferences and their goals of care to help them make the best decision for them.
Is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Returns with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University with us every week. What are you expecting in the budget on Thursday?
Probably a lot of cognitive dissonance. That's a fancy word for saying confusion, fiscal confusion. What they're going to be doing, both, I think, in that budget is doing what my dear late mother used to do, driving down the road very slowly. She would have one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. And she did. Drove me crazy, and she really did. Drove very slowly, but one foot on the brake, one foot on the gas. And just to be, you know, and that's what Chrystia Freeland's going to be doing. She's going to be spouting and shouting fiscal prudence and fiscal responsibility, and, you know, we're pruning while they're shoveling money out the door faster than the Mad Hatter. And so I agree with Bill Robson of the C.D. Howe Institute. There's a real conflict right now in Canada between fiscal policy and monetary policy. Monetary policy, Sharon Kazicki, a brilliant woman who's the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada, and I've met her a couple of times professionally downtown. Very, very intelligent, highly intelligent individual. Was 20 years at the Federal Reserve Bank in the States, deeply experienced, and she gave a speech saying rates are going to go up a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And a lot more rapidly,
hawkish,
quicker.
Very hawkish.
They're going to jump higher and more rapidly than people realized, and that's because of inflation.
Yeah.
And inflation, and I know this government tries to sidestep it by saying we didn't cause it, therefore whatever we do doesn't have any impact on inflation. This is bogus, everybody. Yes, Canada did not cause the inflation. But to say that because you didn't cause it, therefore you have no impact on it, is just simply false. It's dishonest. Lyndon Johnson, everyone agrees, all the economists agree, created the inflation of the late 60s, early 70s with the Vietnam, by spending billions on the Vietnam War and on the war on poverty without increasing taxes to pay for it and not allowing interest rates to go up because he threatened the Federal Reserve Chair, don't you dare. He basically threatened to, impeach him or something. But then Canada, under Pierre Trudeau, exacerbated the inflation that was imported from the States for sure, but we made it worse by spending like crazy, running up big deficits. So governments, even if they don't cause the inflation originally, can nonetheless contribute to it and make it worse. And I'm arguing that, I wish Pierre Poilievre would make this argument, by the way. I'm arguing that Chrystia Freeland, in pumping a lot of money out the door after the economy is completely recovered, all the stats show that every last job has been recovered, plus a whole bunch more. And we're growing at double and triple the rate before COVID. And we're running at, the Bank of Canada says we're running at essentially 100% capacity, meaning there's no slack left in the system.
Yeah.
And that is when you get inflation getting worse. And so what they're doing is they're going to make the situation worse, and we're going to experience possibly a recession, possibly the stagflation of the 70s, where inflation was going up. I lived through it. It was going up 5, 6, 7% a year, but the growth was not going up. In other words, the growth was the same as the inflation. In other words, the economy wasn't growing at all, even though it showed increases of 7% a year. The inflation was 7%. So essentially,
see, there's been so much talk, Professor, about, the Bank of Canada's behind the curve. It should have tightened its monetary policy sooner. It should have raised rates sooner. But not much talk about the fiscal side of things in the federal government and whether it's behind the curve and whether it should have retreated on its spending and borrowing program sooner. And that's what Bill Robson is saying in his latest from the C.D. Howe Institute, that the federal government has to acknowledge that its spending and its borrowing have exceeded what the economy needs, and that it's making us vulnerable because it keeps putting gasoline on the fire, and and then in rushes the Bank of Canada, and to put out the fire, it keeps raising interest rates. It raise interest rates, and what's going to happen? Recession. If they don't get on the same page, there's going to be a recession. That's Mr. Robson's fears.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I've been arguing for the last 2 years. He says it more eloquently in his Globe and Mail op-ed. And so when you see interest rates go up, I hope every listener does not blame the Bank of Canada. They're responding to the deck of cards given to them by the dealer. The dealer is Ottawa and the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, and they're dealing with shady cards. Okay, and they are the culprits. They're the independent variable. They are the people who are revving up the economy, and lots of people were warning about this. It wasn't just Bill Robson and the C.D. Howe. Don Drummond, who is no conservative, he was under Kretschmann.
But he's with C.D. Howe now, too.
He is now, but he was the chief economist of the TD Bank, and he was hired by the McGuinty government to do the analysis of provincial government spending. So he's been seen as he's a centrist, probably a blue liberal Trudeau type. And they're not the only two. David Dodge has been warning about this for the last 2 years, that we were overstimulating, pouring gasoline on the fire, and it was going to drive up rates and lead to higher interest rates. So when you next hear the interest rate going up 0.5 point, you can blame Mr. Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, because I believe they're far more culpable than the Bank of Canada that's merely reacting to a bad set of cards.
Okay, look, what can they do for housing? What could be done for housing?
They'll never do it. I have a solution, and it's not crazy at all. I mean, it's pretty radical. Read the Riot Act to the municipalities. Well, they don't report to the federal government. Oh, the federal government, if you look at the budget I have, and you look at the amount that the federal government, the government of Canada, transfers to the municipalities across Canada annually, it just boggles the brain.
Yeah, especially in this city.
Especially in this city. Shared cost programs, you name it.
Yeah.
And you just simply say, as of 12 months from now, each municipality is going to approve X number of housing starts, or we will cut your transfers from the government of Canada by a certain formula, and it will be tied to the number of houses that have been approved by you, the municipality of Ottawa, like or Toronto or
building
Vancouver.
Permits issued or whatever the thing
That's
is.
called socking them in right between the eyeballs with money.
Yeah.
Money.
Especially in this city, right, Professor? How much, how reliant this city is on federal government money.
Unbelievable.
So, right?
The federal government alone, through the PILT, the payment in lieu of taxes, which is not quite the same thing, but still, it's still a transfer. It's $400 billion. It's 400 million annually. I'm sorry, and the budget is $4 billion annually, so 400 million is the PILT. But the government transfers the gas tax across Canada to the municipalities.
Yeah.
It transfers money for LRT and all manner of things.
Yeah.
And because housing has such an impact on everything else, they should just simply, let's be blunt, blackmail the mayors of Canada and say, you want our money? This is what you, Mayor John Tory and Mayor Watson, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, I don't care what your excuse is, we're going to reduce your funding by a set formula so you know exactly what your bad policies are costing your city.
Okay. That's not a bad idea,
It's the only
they
thing
won't
that's
do
work.
it, as you say.
You can jawbone and give speeches to the cows come home. It's not going to work until you hit them where it really hurts, which is the transfer of money to the municipalities.
All right. Hey, we'll see what the budget brings on Thursday. Thank you again for today. Great stuff.
Pleasure.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, when we come back, we're going to get into this IPCC report, now or never, 3 years to save the world. Climate change. Talk back hour, 750-1310, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Green light, motors on, need some loving and the feeling is strong. Slow down.
Hi, my name is Kelly Lee Evans, and I am so excited to be performing for Encore Ottawa 3. I think my music really represents me and the message that I feel like I feel like I'm constantly in this search for happiness. And sometimes I'm getting it, like sometimes I'm nailing it, and sometimes I'm just like I'm not. Which I think maybe is like the story of so many of us. And I love for my music to have a feeling of joy, but I recognize that you can have sadness as well. So I tend to have music that really floats and moves along human emotions because that's real life.
Baby, make this feeling last. Try to make magic happen, but you put in up a fight. So I'll be alone tonight.
I was so excited when I found out that I was given this grant to be able to make this concert because I knew it was going to be the first opportunity that I was able to play these songs for others. This album was recorded really, truly in isolation in the sense that I wrote the music by myself and everybody was in their little, homes recording each of their parts. And so nobody ever got together in a room together to play this music. So you're gonna see, I think, the joy of playing live, of being together. And you're gonna see why I think organizations like Oh Mike exist, so that musicians can be out here in Ottawa creating. And there's one element missing, the live audience is missing, but I know that people at home will definitely feel like what we're trying to put out.
News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, April 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Just taking center stage at the UN Security Council is the Ukrainian president. Volodymyr Zelensky is addressing the UN's most powerful body. Now, evidence is growing of civilian massacres in areas where Russian soldiers occupied Ukraine. Reporter James Longman is the town of Bucha, just outside Kiev.
This whole road is just strewn with burnt-out cars. When you get into town, it just gets so much worse. We've been speaking to people here, Ukrainians who are hunkered down in their buildings, hiding in their basements, as Russians were living in their buildings. Russia has said the crimes that we've seen here were staged. They were not. We have seen them.
Associated Press journalists in Bucha have counted dozens of corpses in civilian clothing. Many appeared to have been shot at close range and had their hands bound or their flesh burned. City News Time, 10:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The average high, about 8 degrees, will be above that today with the high near 12. We'll have a bit of sunshine to start, then the clouds will increase. And then tonight we'll get back into a little bit of clearing. The wind, though, will be quite brisk out of the east-northeast. Tonight, 2 degrees for the low. Tomorrow, chance of showers, a brisk east wind, and up to 14. For today, the high 12.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 5 degrees. A proposed development for Montreal Road getting the thumbs up from the Vanier BIA and the Residents Association to receive a tax incentive from the city. The high-rises for the western edge of Vanier will bring new residential buildings along with retail space that are needed along Montreal Road, according to those groups. Natalie Currie is with the area BIA, and she says they are fully behind the proposal on Montreal Road and also Selkirk.
This applicant has already given almost $6 million in fees and permits to the city before a single shovel has hit the ground. Maine and Maine have been working very closely with the BIA and the Community Association from the onset of their investment on our Main Street. They have allocated time and funds to ensure all current retail tenants were relocated within the BIA, including several racialized businesses.
The developer is looking for a grant, which is the same one afforded a car dealership currently under construction at Saint Laurent and Montreal Road. It cuts the property tax rate for 10 years, and that was approved. It's a project in the early stages, but the Byward Market could get a new showcase attraction. Here's City News reporter Chris Currie.
70 Clarence Street was home to a parking garage and some retail stores, but could be something much grander soon. The City of Ottawa has launched a request for expressions of interest, basically asking developers what they think could go there and describe it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. So City Councillor Matthew Fleury, what should go there?
We're looking for something that really draws local, that draws tourists, that draws everyone throughout the year, not just at a particular season, that there's some activity daytime, but also on during the evenings.
All this hopefully to be completed by the Byward Market's 200th anniversary in 2027. Chris Currie's City News.
City News Time, 10:03. The Heritage Minister, Pablo Rodriguez, will introduce legislation today. It would make companies like Google pay Canadian media outlets for reusing their news content on their platforms. The bill is designed to help support the media industry and fight fake news that does circulate online. And a day after Twitter revealed Tesla CEO Elon Musk had bought a 9% stake in the company, it has announced he's joining the board of directors. Musk won't be allowed to own more than 14.9% of Twitter's outstanding stock for as long as he is a board member, and then for 90 days after that. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
So I'm framing it like this. Are you a now person or are you a never person? Are you willing to make changes to your lifestyle to fight climate change, to lower emissions, and do it now? Or are you a never person? Like, I'm never doing that. I'm talking about, the kind of home you live in, where you live, sort of vehicle you drive, the kind of food you eat, Because it's now or never. So are you a now person or a never person? And that's how I'm kind of setting things up today. I want to keep track of your answers as well. At 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Are you a now person or a never person? Okay. The United Nations Climate Panel has a new report, and it says we have 3 years. 3 years. Okay. It's now or never. It's now or never. We have 3 years. It says greenhouse gas emissions must peak in 3 years. Or, that's it. That's it. The world could be unlivable. But it also means we all have to make big changes in our lives. It goes well beyond electric cars. It goes well beyond the oil sands, okay? It goes to the very way we live, okay? The kind of home you live in, where you live, the kind of vehicle you drive, if you drive at all. It's about your expectations for economic growth, to what we eat, our diets, okay? And this report says we have to start now. We should have started years ago, but you have to start now. And we have to make big progress in just the next 3 years, because greenhouse gas emissions have to peak by 2025. And then 25 years after that, those emissions have to go away. Net zero, what's called net zero. And whatever's pumped into the atmosphere, we got to eliminate it somehow. If a ton goes out, a ton has to be eliminated. Maybe that's carbon capture and storage. Who knows? If not, the planet will warm beyond what the planet can take. And it's going to be a disaster. Unrelenting extreme weather. This is according to the IPCC. Not me, the IPCC. Everyone has a part to play, and everyone has to do their part. So are you a now person, or are you a never person? Gosh, when I read the news reports about this latest report, because this is just the latest report from the United Nations on climate change, from the IPCC, I just wonder, are people really going to be willing to make these kinds of sacrifices? Willing to make these sorts of changes in their everyday lives? We're talking about everything. Literally everything. From the food we eat to that kind of house we live in, how we heat the house. Maybe we all have to start living in smaller houses. I don't know. And maybe we don't live where we would like to live. Maybe picture this in Ottawa here, okay? We've just been through this whole thing with the official plan. Maybe where there was once one house, one single family house, 3 bedrooms, front yard, backyard. Maybe that's going to be a thing of the past. And when that house is sold, it's basically going to be bulldozed, and what replaces it? 4 houses, basically 4 living quarters, right? And where once one family used to live, well, now you have 4. This is the vision here in Ottawa. Isn't that one of the driving forces of Ottawa's official plan of intensity and density, intensification? You think about what this report from the IPCC should really mean for community planning here, just in our city. Does it make sense? Let me ask you this. Does it make sense to have a massive new development east of the city, like the Taube development? That was controversial from the very start, wasn't it? Now they say, don't worry, it's going to be a green 15-minute community. Oh, really? All the city services have to go out there, right? Roads, sewers, sidewalks, lighting, libraries, garbage, police, fire, ambulance, all of it. Sprawl, sprawl. You know, this report from the IPCC, pretty obvious. Not big fans of sprawl. And if people plan to live there, where are they going to work? They going to work there? Or are they going to come into work in the city? And if they're going to come to work in the city, how are they going to get into the city? If it's not by an electric car, well, they shouldn't be doing it. They should be riding public transit, preferably electrified public transit, according to this report. See, those are just some examples of how profound the suggestions are in this IPCC report. Greenhouse gas emissions have to peak in 3 years. Peak. Taywin, I think a development like that, a new subdivision in the city, but very much on the outskirts of the city, it's not going to help lower greenhouse gases, right? This might mean we have no choice but to build Phase 3 of light rail. The city has no money to build Phase 3 of light rail, has no plan to build Phase 3 of light rail unless the upper levels of government pay for it. This city doesn't know how it's going to pay for OC Transpo this year or next year without losing a pile of money. But maybe it has no choice, according to this report, because it's now or never. It's now or it's never. We're talking about more money on bike lanes, not less. More e-scooters, David's favorite e-scooters, not less. More complete streets. More, you know what? It may mean cordon fees. They have these in some cities, cordon fees. You want to drive your car to work? Are you kidding? From the suburbs in downtown? No, you're going to have to pay a fee. $10 a day, $12 a day. Cordon fee, basically a cover charge to get into the city of Ottawa. It's that exciting. Wait till you see the opening act. This is the sort of change in people's lives that this report is talking about, envisioning worldwide, not just here in Ottawa. So I want to know this morning, are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to do your part? It's the fight against climate change. You have to change the type of vehicle you drive. Go electric. I think that's the way the auto industry is going anyway. I think that's obvious to anyone. The car makers have said as much. In the next 10 years, most of the new vehicles in the dealers' showrooms are going to be electric anyway. They think, and you think they would know what you think, they think you, or your children, probably better said, want electric cars. But it may mean a much smaller vehicle in the interim. And think, 4 of the 5 best-selling vehicles in Canada, all full-size pickup trucks. F-Series from Ford, Dodge Ram, Chevy Silverado, GMC Sierra. Obviously, this can't continue. Not much longer. We have to peak on greenhouse gases within 3 years. Because it's now or never. This report talks about you have to change your diet. Eating meat. Bad for the environment, eating meat. Now, I'm changing my diet because I just can't afford meat. Inflation is taking care of it. But meat produces too much methane. Methane's a greenhouse gas. We need to adopt a more plant-based diet. Plant-based diets, easier on the environment. Think about this, folks. Drive an electric car. Take public transit. Don't live in the suburbs. Eat less meat. So are you a now person or a never person? 750-1310. Are you a now person or a never person? Daniel in Sandy Hill. Good morning, Daniel. Morning, Daniel. I hear Daniel, but I think we've lost Daniel. That's too bad. Barry in Ottawa. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, good morning, Barry. Are you a now person or are you a never person?
Well, I don't think I'm a now person, but I don't think I'm going to say that I'm a never person.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's now or never, Barry. It's now or never.
Wow.
You know.
According to who? Like, I don't
According to
think
the
China,
United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, sir. Latest report.
well, I don't believe anything that comes out of the United Nations anyways, but
okay.
My feelings are, Rob, that, a lot of people are just going to laugh at that and say no because, Trudeau, he can do all he wants to cost us lots of money and make our lives miserable just for carbon tax and inflation, but all the meetings they have, none of those meetings are with the big countries that are the biggest polluters like China and India.
Right.
And those countries will never get on board in 3 years. So everybody here is going to say, well, why should we do it?
Why should we? If they're not going to do it.
Everybody else can't do it, you know?
Yeah, gotcha, Barry. Gotcha. Yeah, sure. Valid point. Okay, let's go to Sandy Hill. Daniel, you're on the City News. Daniel.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, hi, Daniel. Are you like a now person or a never person?
I'm certainly a now person.
You're a now person. Okay, interesting.
I just wanted to add to, I've been listening to your show. I mean, you've covered this topic times, and I've heard the argument too that people are making that here in Canada, we're just a blip in the world emission chart. It's China, it's India, it's these countries, but
yeah. Isn't that valid, though? Isn't that valid?
Well, the counter-argument, Rob, is that we, on a per capita basis, we are at or near the very top of the world in terms of emissions per capita.
Yeah. We're a big country.
Right?
We're a big country, though. We're a big country in a northern climate, right?
Yeah, but if you look at it in the big picture, we're all citizens on the same planet here. If everyone was consuming the way we are here in Canada, the planet would be on fire already.
Okay. All right. Yep. But we're not, though. We're not. I mean, China is burning more coal than the rest of the world combined. Yeah, one country.
Also, here in Canada, we have the energy, we have the LNG, we have policies in place to displace some of that coal. So we can help in our per capita consumption and our displacement as well in terms of our exports to China in terms of LNG. That's one example out of many.
Yes. But if greenhouse gas emissions have to peak in 3 years, which this report says in 3 years, and then be net zero 25 years after that, it's going to take pipelines, it's going to take LNG terminals, it's going to take all kinds of infrastructure in order to have, say, natural gas act as a bridge fuel, Daniel. Which would be very carbon intensive, right?
3 years is too short of a time frame, but we're putting policies in place to have drastically reduced emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050.
Yeah.
So we're on the right path, and people are complaining too about short-term pain in terms of gas prices and other things, but in terms of long-term human suffering, I mean the climate crisis is going to cause much more human suffering than.
All right. So you're a now person.
Right now.
You're a now person. I respect that.
No question.
So what are you doing in your life? Your personal life?
For one thing, I've been driving an electric vehicle since 2017.
Okay.
First it was plug-in hybrids, and now it's fully electric.
Okay.
I live in a small home. I keep my heating cost as low as possible.
Okay.
I walk and bike as much as possible.
Right.
But what I hear, especially from your listeners, I mean, it's not just your listeners, but it seems like they're not willing to make any sacrifices.
Well, there will be people who will call during this hour. You're not one of them, but there will be people who say, "I'm never doing that. I'm never doing that."
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's where the role of government has to come in. Government has to step in and put in policies in place to force that behavioral change that's necessary.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. There you go. 10:19. Rob Snow Show. Talk back out. Are you a now person or a never person? 3 years. Greenhouse gas emissions have to peak in 3 years, be net zero by 2050, or it's over. 750-1310. Rob Snow Show, City News.
yourselves you arrive, and white coats came in heads held low. They talk for a bit, shuffle outside. We close the curtains, held each other, and we cried. And we said hello at the same time as we say goodbye. With smallest and wingless, oh, leaving as soon as you'd arrive. Sadness is love wasted, with no little heart to place it inside. Close the curtains and held each other and cried. Said hello the same time as we close the curtains and held each other and we cried. We said hello at the same time as we say goodbye.
No show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Are you a now person or a never person? A now person is willing to make changes to their lifestyle in order to fight climate change and do it now. Or you are like a never person. A now person or a never person. I mean, the kind of home you live in, where you live, the vehicle you drive, even the food you eat. Even the food you eat, because greenhouse gas emissions must peak in 3 years, according to the latest IPCC report from the United Nations. So, are you a now person? Are you a never person? Dave in Beechwood. Dave, you're on City News. Dave?
Good morning.
Hi, Dave.
I think a lot of us have been sort of now people for a couple of decades with our recycling and cutting back, using smaller cars. But it's kind of like, to me, I'm with Barry at the outset where he said,
oh, really? Okay.
Unless China gets on board and India and the people who are enjoying their industrial revolution, then what's sort of, how are we going to really help by, cutting back a little more than we've already done? I kind of liken it to, like, just use this for an example. Say you got a neighbor, and every day he burns wood, branches from trees, leaves, makes a pile in the backyard and burns them. And there's smoke going up all over the neighborhood.
Sure.
And they send a report to everybody on the block except for the neighbor who's doing this.
Okay.
And they ask, we need you to cut your thermostat down by a degree or two at night, not use your air conditioning, or your whole neighborhood's going to be severely polluted.
Air quality erosion. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, unless China is on board and and the developing nations.
But what about this idea? You need to drive an electric car, or take public transit, live closer to downtown. Well, you're calling from Beechwood.
Yeah, I've always been doing that.
You've always been doing that. Okay. Eat less meat. Eat less meat. Very carbon intensive to eat meat, right? Eat more veggies. Do what your mother said. Eat your veggies. You know, these are some of the personal choices that this report says have to be made. Maybe even legislated, like the previous caller said. Maybe even legislated. We
do need to consume an awful lot less. Granted, yes, I agree with that 100%. We need to consume less, but there's some people, like for example, the dollar store, like a Dollarama, which is maybe 80% plastic products. But they're the only products that a lot of people can afford. They can afford like that wooden spoon at a specialty shop for $10. They need the plastic spoon, you know, for
$1.
For $1. Yeah, because they can't afford it. And if you decide, well, we're going to close all the dollar stores and the demand will go down, and China will be producing less. But, you know, you have to think of the side effects.
Okay. All right. Thank you. In Low, Quebec. Patrick. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Are you like a now person or a never person?
I'm more of a what makes us believe that they know what they're doing person.
Okay. All right. Okay. Why do you put it that way? Okay.
Well, I just so happened to have bought a farm a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And so the perspective from the city, you know, versus the rural is very, very different.
Yes.
And these types of mandates, and we've been under mandates for the past 2 years, seem to be accelerating. And the problem I see is that some people will benefit, but the vast majority will suffer from these things. It's as if we want to redo society's fabric to please a certain type of view. I see more control. I see less choices. And ultimately, I don't think it's the government's role to dictate how we live. I think it's better to promote, you know.
But what if the way you live, Patrick, is causing a climate catastrophe?
Well, that's
causing more wildfires and causing more floods or droughts or famines and everything else that goes along with the deteriorating climate, you know.
That is a good point, and I think we need to be humble in our understanding of how, you know, the planet works. I mean, just look at how we've dealt with the virus. We have difficulties in understanding the infinite small, and what makes us believe that we know how the infinite big works.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that we need to continue in overconsumption and all of this. I think these things, as you explain them to people understand, and they make these choices, and they start producing more. They start producing their own vegetables. They start helping their neighbors, and that's a community. It's like from the bottom up, but we're doing everything from the top down, and in the process, we're creating these unintended consequences that make things even more difficult for the vast majority of individuals.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Very thoughtful calls this morning. Be right back right after the news. Halftime Talk Back Hour. Are you a now person? Are you a never person? Maybe somewhere in between. We're talking climate change in light of the IPCC report that is out, that greenhouse gases they had to peak in 3 years, and that's it. Or we're in a world of hurt. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, April 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 8 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Finance and Economic Development Committee has approved a CIP for the developers of a portion of Vanier. The area between Montreal Road and Selkirk on the western edge of Vanier asked for this Community Improvement Program grant. That will give a 75% discount on property tax over a 10-year period. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is rejecting Russia's claim that atrocities being revealed in Ukraine were staged. He believes that as Russian troops retreat from areas around the capital of Kyiv, more mass graves, more atrocities, and more examples of war crimes are going to be discovered. International Aid Group says the number of West Africans needing emergency food aid has nearly quadrupled to 27 million just in the past 7 years. The group says the number could jump to 38 million just by June this year if action isn't taken soon. Children are suffering deeply. The UN estimates about 6.3 million children 5 years of age and younger are going to be acutely malnourished this year. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Are you a now person or a never person? And the reason I put it that way is because climate change, the threat of climate change back in the news in a big way this morning because of a massive new report from the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from the United Nations, IPCC. And I mean, the headlines, they're every bit as scary, frightening, apocalyptic as you can imagine. It's now or never, screams the headlines. It's now or never. So I want to give you a taste, okay, of just how dire the news coverage is this morning on this story. This is from The Guardian out of the UK. I wanted to start with The Guardian because The Guardian was the first major news organization to declare, we're not going to call it a climate change. We're not going to call it climate change anymore in our news coverage. That doesn't do the threat justice. It doesn't capture the severity of the issue. So when we write about environmental issues, we're going to call it things like climate breakdown, or climate emergency, or climate crisis, or global heating. Not even global warming is appropriate anymore. You got to call it global heating, according to The Guardian. So this is the headline, IPCC report. Now or never, if world is to stave off climate disaster. Okay. And let me quote a little bit here. The world can still hope to save off the worst ravages of climate breakdown, but only through a now or never dash to a low-carbon economy and society. Scientists have said in what is, in effect, a final warning for governments on the climate. Like pretty strong stuff, right? Like climate breakdown, final warning, it goes on. Greenhouse gas emissions must peak by 2025 and be nearly halved this decade to give the world a chance of limiting future heating to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Temperatures will soar to more than 3 degrees with catastrophic consequences unless policies and actions are urgently strengthened. Though the report found it was now almost inevitable that temperatures would rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius, the level above which many of the effects of climate breakdown will become irreversible, the IPCC said it could be possible to bring them back down below the critical level by the end of this century, but doing so requires technologies to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which campaigners warned were unproven and could not be a substitute for deep emissions cuts now. Deep emissions cuts, climate breakdown, catastrophic consequences, critical level, all screams urgent, 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 urgent. You get the idea. We have to do it now. Have to do it now. It's the now or never warning from the IPCC. Brandon, Blackburn Hamlet. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brandon. You're on City News. Are you like a now person or a never person, Brandon?
Well, I bought a hybrid car.
Oh, you did? Okay.
In 2018.
Wow. Okay. And how's that working out?
4 years, and it's in for service now. However, I want to say that I believe NORAD has to be updated to protect our northern territories. Mm-hmm. Because we do border with Russia.
Sure. Yeah.
And the other item is the disastrous effects of the Ukraine war and what's going to become of the NATO situation, which will take years to resolve. Mm-hmm. However, I'm glad we're united.
This is what has the United Nations worried, is because in the immediate effect of that, what you've seen is a rush to secure new energy supplies, primarily fossil fuels, because Russia is such a big supplier of things like oil and natural gas, right? Especially to countries like Germany and other countries in Europe, yes. Brandon, right? So. Yeah. So
they have to make their own decisions, and but we have to all. That's why we have so many diplomats talking to each other across the table.
Yes, 195 when it comes to reports like this one. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Andrew Canada. Good morning. You're on City News. Andrew.
Good morning. I would put myself in the hard never category.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I've been reading IPCC reports for decades. They've been writing IPCC reports and its earlier iteration about 40 years. And the one thing that I can say consistently through all that time is that the predictions that come report after report are consistently wrong. If you go back 20 years, even 30 years, we were supposed to be by now at 1.5 to 2 meters underwater. We were supposed to be past 3 degrees of annual increase. I could list a long list of statistics, and I think that we need to be a lot more. Take the climate porn out of the media for a second and read the actual report. I've read all the other reports up until the most recent one. And when you start digging through the reports, you find some interesting statistics. The reports acknowledge that between now and the turn of the century, our global economy, depending on some specific factors, are looking at about a 4 to 4.5 times growth. Even under the worst scenario of the IPCC, we're looking at a 4.3 times growth. So our capacity to adapt, our capacity to address problems is somehow being totally ignored by the media.
Okay.
Furthermore, I think
adapt and address problems such as, give me an example what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? Just so I understand what you mean.
In terms of how we build, for example, are we building in places that are prone to floods?
Right. Okay.
The situation in BC, the most recent situation in BC being a classic example of stupid decisions that ended up having catastrophic consequences.
Right. The technological advancements in battery technology that makes people overcome their range anxiety and actually go out.
There is no other rational response to this.
Okay.
The suggestion that your very first caller made right at the end of his call, that government needs to force people to make these lifestyle changes, that's precisely the problem.
Okay.
And I think it undersells our capacity to globally as a population to look at new technologies, to look at adaptive strategies. But more importantly, let's not lose our minds over the current predictions, which consistently have been proven wrong.
It's now or never.
Decade after
It's now or never, though, Andrew. It's now or never.
It's not now or never. That's nonsense.
Okay.
Absolute nonsense.
Nonsense.
That's the Guardian that has been the most hysterical news agency for 30 years on this issue. That's the media's headline. But read the actual report. That's what I encourage people to do. Read the actual report. Look at the more nuance that's in there. There's at least 5 different scenarios that are presented and have been consistently presented in the IPCC reports. Most of the time, the media is only focused on scenario 8.5, which is the worst case scenario. We're not even close to tracking that right now.
All right.
If you actually look at the actual evidence, that's not what's reflected in the media reports.
Well, the headline in USA Today is unlivable. Unlivable. From USA Today, it's now or never. UN climate report shows globe is on track toward an unlivable world.
And I tell people to read
the report.
Headlines,
yep. Gotcha.
Read the actual report.
Okay.
Take a deep breath. We don't need to destroy our economies. That's actually going to have a worse effect. In fact, the most effective strategy of all, if we really want to have an environmentally strong global population, the most effective thing we can do is to bring as many people out of poverty as quickly as possible. That is the most effective proven strategy to get environmentally responsible policies put in place.
Okay, gotta go, Andrew. Thank you. I got your report. I've got your point. Read the report, he says. Rick in Canada. Rick, thank you for waiting.
Yeah, Rob, I'm going to go with the expert you had on your show on the 15th of November last year.
Okay, all right. Okay,
and I'm sure if Dave checks the logs, he'll see that it was right around then that the expert that was on, I think he was the only one you've had on so far. You were quite pleased about being able to get an environmental climate change expert on your program at the time.
Okay.
And he said that Canada would have met our goals if we hadn't had more people come into Canada.
I don't remember any of this interview, sir.
That's what you said back 2 or 3 weeks later when I mentioned that. You said, I'll have to take your word for it. I don't recall him saying that, but he did say it. He distinctly said it. And
I don't know if he said it. I don't even know who you're talking about.
Well, sorry, you'd have to check your logs on that. But I wrote it down on my notes at the time that this is what this expert had said.
Right.
And I have to agree because there's another expert that was on B&M Bloomberg that said that Canada is running out of usable land. Whenever we want to build anything now, we have to take up agricultural land, or we can't build in swamps, just like the previous caller said, or it's all rock and you can't build on that either. So we're in a bind here. And I'd say if the government's serious about climate change, then the first thing they need to do is say no new building permits will be issued unless those units, those houses, are covered off by heat pumps or turbine or solar panels or whatever, but no gas furnaces can go in there.
Right. Okay. Well, our government it says it's serious about it. It says emissions have only gone up, but it says it's serious about it.
Well, exactly. So why should I? That's why you can put me in the never category, because every time I try to do something, my government is actively working against me. Like, for example, by bringing each additional person that comes in to our country or any other country.
Right. Well, we should. Should we not have immigration, Rick? Is that what you're saying? We shouldn't have immigration.
We shouldn't. We should be turning around now and saying we're full. We've got to deal with these population problems.
We're full. Okay, Rick. See ya, buddy. Lose my number. Be right back. 10:45. Rob Snow Show. This is City News.
I'm Emily Bertrand, the owner of Royale Equestrian Center. This is Diamond. She's a 10-year-old thoroughbred. She used to be a racehorse and then made the transition to a riding horse. She loves jumping, and she's used for our more advanced students. So we started the farm 14 years ago with my mom and brother. My brother was actually driving by one day and saw the sign, and we applied. There were 60 applicants, and we got it. When we first started, there was not very much here, so our property's about 25 acres, and there was just this 100-year-old barn. And from there, we built onto it. We fixed up one stall at a time, one paddock at a time. We added one horse at a time, and slowly it built into what it is today. Every year, we're improving and trying to continue to build. And most recently, we added 2 shed row barns this year. I love horses. I've been obsessed with horses since I was a little girl. The first time I got to ride, I was 4 years old, and I just loved it. My mom thought it was going to be a phase, and that phase never ended. I kept riding all through high school, and then eventually, started Royale Equestrian Center. It was my dream to always own a farm and to build a place that I could share my passion for horses with others and do the same thing for the kids that the horses did for me. So I absolutely love it. It's a dream come true. COVID hit, that was challenging. I was pretty stressed, especially the first few months, trying to figure out how are we going to navigate all of this. Our business is based on people coming in. We don't make much revenue if there's nobody coming in to ride. So that was really challenging. And then the other aspect of it was how are we going to care for all these horses if we're fully shut down and there's no income coming in. So we worked really hard. Some of our team were so kind to actually just come in and volunteer and help us out. And we made through it. We got through it. It's been hard and a lot of work, but it's also shown us how resilient we can be. So I'm happy with how we're coming out of COVID. Hopefully this is, we're nearing the end of all the shutdowns, but we've, survived it, and now we're starting to thrive again, which is great. So we have a great team. We have about 14 coaches, and then we have all our regular barn staff. We have our maintenance manager and crew, and if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this. It takes a huge amount of people, and then we also have a volunteer program. The volunteer program, it helps with us, especially with our beginner program, so they help with tacking up the horses and caring for the horses when we're really busy. And then they also get to gain some work experience. We take co-op students on. We're quite a busy and vibrant place, and it takes a lot of people to make it work, even through to behind the scenes from our accountants, my family, who are always stepping in to help out. It takes a small village.
Your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Get right back to the phones. Are you a now or never person when it comes to fighting climate change? Are you willing to make lifestyle changes in order to fight climate change? Have you been doing it already? Are you a now or never person? I'm talking about the kind of home you live in, where you live, the vehicle you drive, even the food you eat, because it's now or never. It's now or never, according to the IPCC. Rod in Nepean. Good morning, Rod.
Morning, Rob.
Morning, Rod.
Long time fan of yours, first time caller.
I appreciate that, Rod. Thank you for calling.
So I'm optimistic that I will be an early adopter, but I just don't. Dr. Ian Lee always made a very good point about how the electrical infrastructure is, especially in Ontario. That there's vast improvements that are required to be done to actually help people meet those targets that the government says they want met. But I'm doubtful that they're actually going to put some money into it and some effort into helping the average Canadian achieve those goals.
Okay, so you would like to be a now person, but you're just not there yet, you're saying?
Exactly. I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of us want to be that now person.
Right.
Deep down inside, we want to do the right thing for the environment.
Yeah.
We want to leave something for our kids to actually enjoy. But I just don't know how it's going to come together.
Well, it seems daunting, doesn't it? Right?
Very
exceptionally daunting, right? Yeah. Yeah.
It's easy. Yeah. It's easy to write policy. It's easy to write down this is what you should do. But if nobody's going to, we need someone to actually hold our hands and say this is how we're going to do it, and they start actually working on it.
Yeah. Good call, Rod. Thank you for calling. Thank you for being a first-time caller. Appreciate that. Chris in Canada. Chris here on City News. Chris.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
I was a never until the Cop-Out 26 forums where we were at the 11th hour and we're all going to die, and now I'm a never will be.
Now you're never what? A never what?
I'm a never will be.
Never will.
I will never be swayed. The hypocrisies of the people shaking their fingers at us is astounding.
Okay.
I mean, 118 private jets to the Compound 26. What was the carbon footprint on that? Probably more than I would make in 100 years because I don't travel.
Sure.
So until the government can correct their ways, why should anyone really take them seriously?
Like lead by example. Lead by example. Yeah. Why did Prime Minister Trudeau and 2 other cabinet ministers have to fly to Vancouver to announce their climate plan?
Yeah, I mean, he's been the king of the podium at the cottage for the last 2 years. You can make all your announcements from there, but their only extreme measures is finding new ways to tax us, and it's garbage. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. Let's take this one. Joe in Beckwith. Joe, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rob.
Hey, Joe.
I don't like these all or nothing, now or never, points
Joe.
of view.
It's now or never.
You know?
It's now or never.
Yeah.
Okay.
But being the UN, you think they would have a middle ground. Because this now or never.
It's
like
not very diplomatic,
stated,
you're saying? Does this not the diplomatic approach, or?
Well, a hybrid approach, because we don't all live in a city. So people living in a city, they do have the option to bike or use public transit, etc. But myself, out in Beckwith, I'm heating with propane, and unless the electricity prices can be comparable to be heating with propane, I'm not about to go out and get an electric furnace. And I have to drive to work, so I suppose I could get a very expensive electric vehicle, but I think if they went with a hybrid approach, more people would be on board. There wouldn't be this all or nothing, you're with them or you're against them.
You have to do it. You have to do it now, and there's no time to waste. The clock is ticking.
Exactly. But if we kept every large building using natural gas as they are now, we lowered the price of electricity by perhaps not selling a large amount to the United States at a discount price, we'd be able to afford to heat our house with electricity. It might be a little more than natural gas.
This is a big question. I mean, say it costs, the Canadian Press story this morning says $100 billion, or maybe even several $100 billion. Professor Lee thinks it would cost $1 trillion to upgrade the electricity grid. To electrify every building, every vehicle, this sort of thing. Where are we going to get that money? It's either coming from you and me, Joe, either through our taxes or through the utility bill, right?
Well, that's just it. That's
through Hydro One,
the hybrid model.
Yeah,
we could we could do the upgrades necessary to save the planet, and we can also keep the people in the oil and gas industry working, which is very good for the tax dollars of the Canadian government.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, Joe. Thank you for your call from Beckwith. This is the Canadian News hook on this. This again from the Canadian Press Newswire service. Quote, Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says a new report from the United Nations Climate Agency shows the oil and gas sector cannot do business as usual, even as the government is still considering approving a new offshore oil production project. The report points to the ongoing investment in fossil fuels as a major problem. Canada revealed last week a new plan to hit its emissions reduction targets for 2030, projecting oil and gas must slash its carbon-related pollution by 42% from current levels. Guilbeault calls the UN report sobering and says the government knows it must move quickly to implement new policies to cut emissions. That's just from the Canadian Press. Now, Bill in Toronto. Bill.
Well, when you touch on Guilbeault, he's pretty much an activist, environmentalist.
Sure.
I mean, he's been arrested. The guy's off the chart.
Yeah. He's committed. He's committed.
That's all I'm saying is that I'm on board. If they finally gotten it right, I've been listening to this for 20 years.
Yeah,
the polar caps were going to melt. Florida was going to be underwater by now. If they're right now, if they finally gotten it right after 20 years, maybe I'll get on board. But another good thing to look at here is Biden and Trudeau are saying the best way to hurt Putin is to cut off oil exports and shut down his oil industry. That'll kill their economy. Isn't that what they're doing to us here in North America?
Oh. Just slower. right. Just slower. Well, but on that point, it's such a good point you make, Bill. I mean, You know, this report, you would think a report like this from the IPCC, and given the true believers in the Trudeau government, I mean, it should end all discussion about things like building pipelines, you know, keep our oil and gas in the ground, landlocked. It'd make a lot of environmentalists happy. I don't think it'd be great for the economy. This report actually admits the global economy would have to take a hit. But we have no choice because it's now or never, and you can either accept slower economic growth or a warming world filled with extreme weather and climate misery. You know, like The Guardian calls it climate breakdown. Climate breakdown. Blackburn. Is it Blackburn Hamlet? Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
I'm good, Jerry. Thank you. I've been enjoying the discussion today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, long time no call. I'm the former angry oil worker from Calgary.
Oh, yeah, Jerry. Yeah. Okay.
You know, to me, okay, this is a simplification for an analogy. But what this is to me is the paper bag versus the plastic bag. Okay. Remember back when we had paper bags?
Sure.
We got to stop using the paper bags because we're going to kill all the trees. So we stopped using paper bags, and now plastic bags are the scourge of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now they have the temerity to charge you for plastic bags or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and then I read recently.
Well, our government may phase out the use of those plastic bags altogether, right? Banning single-use plastics. So
no, and I don't have a problem with that. But to me, this whole electric car, internal combustion stuff, I'm a never guy, by the way.
Never guy. Okay.
Yeah, but you know, I know it's a simple analogy, but that's what it seems like. Like everybody's running towards the cliff like lemmings right now.
Oh, really?
I read a study done by the University of Calgary that says in another 15 years or so, we're going to have a used solar panel tsunami because they don't have any way of recycling the solar panels. That nobody's come up with anything to recycle the solar panels, and it's the same thing with the lithium-ion batteries for cars, right? There's no way to recycle them. So sooner or later,
not now. Maybe there's a market opportunity there for you.
Well, yeah, but they're creating another environmental disaster as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. All right, Jerry, I got to run, Jerry. Got to run, Jerry. Got to run. I don't think we're going to get to the last couple of calls here either. It'll be way over time again. We can touch on these and other stories, including the Conservative Party's leadership race. Leslyn Lewis, the first one to raise all the money. $300,000 seemed to be no problem for her to raise the money and get on the ballot officially in the Conservative Party leadership race. We'll talk about that. And Elon Musk and all his Twitter moves. Michael Taube is coming up, syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Hey, I'm Ash Ravens. I'm a singer-songwriter in Ottawa, Canada. I'm performing on Encore Ottawa 3. It's been great, especially for me, who's a completely newcomer to the Ottawa music industry and music scene. I've been welcomed with open arms. I'm a member of OMIC, and I'm loving it so far. This kind of concert series promotes music and gives us newcomers or even like new bands a big chance to showcase their talents and share their music with the world. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for me to perform at the beautiful Schenkman Arts Center. I'm supported by Rogers TV, obviously, and I've been checking out the previous Encore 1 and 2 videos on Rogers channel, 22 channel, as well as YouTube, and I've been blown away. Frankly, it's so beautiful. It's world class, to be honest. And the lighting and the sound, everything was mind blowing for me. And so I'm really glad that I'm here enjoying this very moment, talking to you guys, going to be performing on stage for Rogers TV and for Mike. Yeah, it's a big opportunity for me.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, April 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 8 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Torture, rape, execution, killings, people thrown down wells. Just some of the examples the Ukrainian president told the UN Security Council he witnessed in areas around the capital of Kyiv. President Zelensky says Russian troops are killing innocent civilians and deporting others, taking them back to Russia. He says Russia wants to turn Ukrainians into silent slaves. He addressed the UN Security Council, saying it undermines the goals, what Russia is doing, of that Security Council. He is demanding justice through a translator.
The Russian military and those who gave them orders must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes in Ukraine. Anyone who has given criminal orders and carried out them by killing our people will be brought before the tribunal, which should be similar to the Nuremberg tribunal.
He asks, is it time to just close the UN, or are we going to restore the UN Charter and bring parity to the body from around the world? Now, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he expects more atrocities to come to light in Ukraine as Russian troops continue to retreat from areas around the capital. Stoltenberg warns that Russia is likely regrouping its forces now with plans to deploy them to eastern and southern Ukraine.
In the coming weeks, we expect a further Russian push in the eastern and southern Ukraine to try to take the entire Donbass and to create a land bridge to occupied Crimea.
The discovery of bodies on the outskirts of Kyiv sparking global outrage and vehement denials from the Russian government that it was responsible. City News Time 11:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
The average high, about 8 degrees, will be above that today with the high near 12. We'll have a bit of sunshine to start, then the clouds will increase. And then tonight we'll get back into a little bit of clearing. The wind, though, will be quite brisk out of the east-northeast. Tonight, 2 degrees for the low. Tomorrow, chance of showers, a brisk east wind, and up to 14. For today, the high, 12.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 8 degrees. The Finance and Economic Development Committee has approved a CIP for developers of a residential and retail complex in Vanier. The Community Improvement Program is a grant. It gives a developer a break on property tax for a 10-year period. Now, the Community Association says the proposed towers will add some 3,200 residential units to the area. Natalie Currie with the Vanier BIA says the development is at the western end of Vanier between Montreal Road and Selkirk. This will help the city and the residents for years.
Once built, the current property taxes of $212,000 annually paid to the city for Eastview Plaza would go up to an estimated $1.6 million annually as revenue to the city. The CIP allows them a 75% discount on that uplift for 10 years, a sum that has been estimated in its case at $5 million.
Now, Carrier says the developer has already paid the city some $6 million through fees and permits, and the shovels are not even in the ground. City News Time 11:04. An elderly couple from Petawawa out over $100,000 after they were the victims of an online fraud. In this case, fraudsters contacted the couple after their credit card was used fraudulently. The person posing as a police official instructed them to take several measures, including moving money they had in bank accounts to a safer location in Canada, Europe, and India. The couple also convinced to give the fake officer access to their computer and online banking. The upper Ottawa Valley OPP remind people to be suspicious of unsolicited calls from bank, credit card companies, or law enforcement. Make sure you verify them before giving out any personal information. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Returns with my friend on the right side of things, former speechwriter to Stephen Joseph Harper, syndicated columnist Michael Taube. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Rob. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. It's great to hear from you. So there's much to discuss. I'd really like to get your take on all the latest buzz, and there's lots to talk about when it comes to the Conservative Party's leadership campaign. Reports this morning that Leslyn Lewis is the first leadership candidate to announce she has submitted the full $300,000. I mean, it's not cheap. $300,000 to get on the ballot.
Yes.
Wow. What does that say about her strength, the strength of her campaign? What do you think?
Yeah, it's not cheap to run a leadership campaign for a major party. I mean, those days are long since gone. Look, at first glance, it's obviously very impressive. The fact that she got it in so early and so quickly. That is fantastic. And obviously for her, that's a huge boost and gives her her and her campaign a little bit of a lift. I'm not surprised she was among the first simply because she had run before, as we know, in the last leadership campaign in 2020 against Erin O'Toole, Peter MacKay, and then party member and then MP for us, Derek Sloan. So she's a known name. She also has some prominent backers who have supported her, either from the fiscal conservative and the social conservative side. So there were people who believed in her the last time, so it's 2 years later, they're going to do it again. And again, because she's an established candidate, at least running for leadership campaigns, and she's now had her, she's been able to dunk her toes a little bit into the political waters, now sitting as an MP in the House of Commons. It's all very helpful. Does this mean, however, being first out of the gates to reach 300,000, does that mean she has a huge advantage over everyone else? No, and polling numbers show that, for example, Pierre Poilievre is miles ahead of everyone, including Jean Charest, Patrick Brown, and Ms. Lewis herself. However, it's something she can obviously tout. It's something she can talk about. And she can use to her advantage to show that obviously there are, even if it's big money people behind her, there is a lot of support for her.
Yeah. Sometimes we forget how well she did in the last leadership race and scoring an upset. She was the kingmaker, really, that put, I think, O'Toole over the top over MacKay. But
yeah, pretty much. I would agree with that. She did actually very well to finish 3 out of 4 candidates, especially when she had absolutely no public image, no name at the very beginning of it. Yeah. She had a lot of experienced people, though, behind her campaign, so that helped.
Yeah, I wonder, if it says much about, say, her and the strength of her candidacy, or just the fact that she is really seen as she's kind of the torchbearer, if you will, for the social conservative wing of that party. So you're going to, you're going to have things like church congregations and pro-life groups and that kind of thing. And that may, if you get that makes it easier to raise money.
I agree. No, absolutely. Look, and that is an advantage for her. And in this party, the Conservative Party, you have to appeal to both fiscal conservatives and social conservatives. And social conservatives make up a huge chunk of the grassroots membership. And you're right. They certainly do have money, and they are willing to spend it on candidates that they believe mesh with their values and principles, whether it being pro-life, pro-cap, whatever their position is on capital punishment. Some pro-lifers are pro, some are opposed to it. Gay marriage, whatever the issue may be, if you actually speak their language, so to speak, you have a good chance of actually getting a lot of appeal, getting a lot of support, and getting the financial support that you need to run a campaign.
Yep. So let's talk about, as you said, the campaign that's kind of miles ahead, and that's the Poilievre campaign. I mean, it's everybody's noticing in political circles. It's on fire. huge crowds wherever he goes. I had some people who were at the event here in Ottawa at the Infinity Center, packed. I mean, an hour before he ever took to the stage, it was packed. Parking lot was packed to capacity. Yep. People turned away. After he speaks, they line up for selfies. The line is like several hundred people long. You know, these are eyewitness accounts. What's the attraction, do you think? What's he doing right?
Well, he's doing everything right as of right now. I mean, again, I've talked about this with you and others, and I'm sure other guests you've had have mentioned it too. Pierre Poilievre is very good when it comes to not just promotion of conservative ideas, values, and the party and the movement itself. He's also very good in terms of self-promotion, which is not a knock against him. You need to do that to be successful in politics, especially in today's political atmosphere. You need to be able to sell your own ideas. And the way to sell your ideas is that you have to use all the available tools and forums at your disposal, which means that you need to use things like social media, YouTube, going through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., to capture a lot of different votes and a lot of different people who are sitting on a lot of different platforms and not necessarily on each of the platforms. Like, you can't just sort of basically say, well, I'm just going to post to Twitter because everyone's there. There are a lot of people on Twitter. We know that. There's billions of users, but we also know that there are lots of people who don't use it. And of the many users on Twitter, you have to then sort of break it down to Canada. It means that you need to obviously extend your reach. And this is something that some of the other candidates obviously understand. I would certainly say Patrick Brown understands it. But for candidates who probably don't, without being nasty, don't get it quite the same way. And Jean Charest would be of that because he wasn't of a generation that really focused on it, and it wasn't obviously a factor when he was prominent in politics. He understands it to some degree, but he needs to ensure that his people obviously promote himself as much as he possibly can. But as we've seen, at least in terms of his social media presence, because Mr. Charest's presence was so minimal to begin with, he's not getting a lot of coverage that way. His message may not be getting out the same way, and the crowds actually show it. Whereas you correctly pointed out, Poilievre's campaign is sort of building into a political movement as we speak, or something very similar to it. Because if you have these huge lineups and huge throngs of people who want to see you and are waiting outside, as you pointed out, and I'll take your word for it, more than an hour before the event actually occurred in Ottawa, that's a sign of someone who is really attracted and really, is very interesting to a lot of grassroots supporters and conservative supporters. And it shows that Poilievre's early messaging, where he's, really touting the, small c fiscal conservative messaging that you want to hear, which is obviously, small government, low taxes, more individual rights and freedoms, and specifically focusing on issues which he will get more into, such as foreign policy, international relations, and the economy, which I'm sure we'll get into because he's been obviously talking a fair bit about Bitcoin. He's trying to sort of capture and build as much support as he can from many different areas of it. And what it shows is right now, this is why he has a massive lead. Yeah. He knows how to sell his message, and he knows how to sell himself.
His wife, according to the people who called me, I wasn't at this event in Ottawa, but his wife has a major role to play in these events. She comes out, she makes a speech, she introduces them, and she talks about her family coming here as refugees from Venezuela, talking about how, living with political persecution in Venezuela, and how gasoline in Venezuela wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, and all of the. She has a really compelling family story herself, so that's a big part of it too. So,
it's a huge part of it, especially if you have a partner who is interested in being in politics and wants to be active. And I've met Aneta a couple times. I'm not going to say that I know her as well as others, but I was always impressed with her. Just a nice person, and she has, very intelligent. She has a really good story to tell, because the horrors that she saw in Venezuela and some of the corruption that she saw, because I believe she was still there. She'll probably kill me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe she was still there when Hugo Chavez was leader, if I'm not mistaken, or she certainly had family members who were still there. So they saw how terrible it was to be led by a tyrant, a person who had, had Marxist ideals for most of his career, not all, but certainly close to the end, and was certainly a hardline socialist who worked hand in hand with Fidel Castro in Cuba and built relations with communist China. She saw the horrors that Venezuela went through, and this was a country that at one time, was obviously far more successful and had far more of a capitalist mentality when it was, when it was able to sell oil to a lot of different places and play a major role in the economy. So she is a huge asset to Pierre, and he knows it, and I'm glad that the two of them want to work together, because sometimes, to be fair, your spouse is not necessarily intrigued or fascinated by the limelight. Like, if I were to run, I know my wife would not be interested in that. But that's her way, and there's nothing wrong with it. Anita wants to be out there with Pierre. She supports him. She wants to help him.
Oh, yeah, she's on the stage making speeches and everything. Yeah. She's part of it. She's part of it, and she's good at it. Yeah. I think I don't think the Liberals are certainly ignoring. I don't think they're salivating. I think there was a time when, like, Pierre, we'd love to run against Pierre Poilievre. Are you kidding me? Of course we want to run against him. I'm not sure if that's really the case because anymore, if they're like licking their chops, because I think what really has them worried is they're looking at the crowd. They're seeing a lot of young people. Which is supposed to be the domain of the Liberal Party or the NDP, right? Like, young people are not supposed to vote for the Conservatives. That's the old gray-haired crowd, right?
Although that's changed a lot, though, Rob.
You think so?
You and I are roughly about the same age. It's not the same way it was 20 to 25 years ago.
Okay. I just find it interesting. The Toronto Star is kind of calling it Bitcoin populism. I don't know if that's a shot, but I do think they're onto something here when they talk about a millennial generation that feels increasingly locked out. And I wouldn't just say millennials; I'd say Gen Z, a locked out generation or generations. I'm locked out of the job market. The boomers and Gen Xers have all the good jobs. I'm locked out of the housing market. I'm locked out of being in the middle class. And Pierre is talking to those people. Pierre Poilievre is talking to those people. And I think it's smart.
Look, I do too. Look, and I think I talked about this with you last week, and I've certainly spoken to others. I don't support Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. It's not something I believe in, because there's the ends and the means of it to try to create something out of nothing, because cryptocurrency isn't anything. There's no such thing as a Bitcoin that you hold in your hand. Yes, I know you can go on eBay and other places and buy quote-unquote Bitcoins. They're fake. Don't buy them. They're nothing. But people are fascinated by cryptocurrency. Look, Elon Musk, tried to build his own, and there obviously is an element of people and an element of society that is fascinated by it. El Salvador, as I think I've mentioned to some, made it its official currency a few months ago. Unsurprising, because El Salvador's economy was a wreck, so they might as well try something different. But what it means is that people are, at least, if nothing else, they're thinking about it and talking about it. Now, I certainly don't want it to replace paper currency. It's not something I believe. I don't believe it should replace any currency in the world. However, if you want to sort of talk about it intellectually and say that why couldn't, say, Bitcoin also represent a type of currency that can coexist with others, even though that's not the end goal of it, that actually appeals, as you correctly point out, to a lot of young people who are look at their futures. They realize it's going to be very difficult for them if they want to own things and do things, which, quite frankly, not a lot of millennials do. But you're right that certainly if you look at Gen Z or others, they certainly have an interest in it. And they probably see something like Bitcoin as the possibility or the one shining light to sort of bring them into the market economy and give them a chance to succeed the same way that their parents, their grandparents, and other members of their family did. And those material possessions, while they don't mean an enormous amount to the millennial crowd, they do mean something to the vast majority of society, because it's something tangible. When you own a house, it's real. When you own a car, it's real. Going on a trip and having experiences which the millennials enjoy, that's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. But if you have nothing to show for at the end, be it savings or be it something tangible that you can actually either hold in your hand or see in front of you, it doesn't mean the same thing. However, if Bitcoin can at least push them into the market and give them some hope and give them some ideas about what, life is like and how hard certain things are. But if you work hard and you try to achieve as much as you can be successful. If it can work as a motivating factor, and it obviously, Mr. Poilievre has been able to get a lot of people to his rallies for that, then fine. He's interested in it. He's already expressed that. He and his wife have both expressed it. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with discussing it. It's an intellectual idea. And if it actually works as a political component, more power to him for figuring it out.
It's interesting. And on the technology side, I mean, it's not, to me, the whole thing is not even about the coins, like whether it's a Bitcoin or an Ether coin or whatever. There's hundreds of coins.
Yes.
It's the blockchain that is correct. The distributed ledger technology is where the economic opportunity is as an industrial strategy. Because when you speak to people in this space, their eyes light up like it's the earliest days of the internet, and it's like now it's okay, sure, it's crypto, whatever, but it's this blockchain technology. We can apply this to medical science. We can do it on the Internet of Things. It'll be part of the supply chain, logistics industry. I mean, it has a lot of potential applications. So for him to say we should be a leader in this, that's a smart thing to say. Of course we should be. We're already in a global competition for investment in this very space. All right, let's. We have a few more minutes, Mike. I'm kind of keeping you over time here.
Yeah,
okay.
No,
all right.
Okay, no worries.
Elon Musk. So it was revealed yesterday he has bought he's bought a 9% stake in Twitter. There were rumors there were reports that he had said, I'm going to start my own social media company. And then I guess he just came to maybe I'll just buy one. Right? I have all this money, right? So he took a 9% stake in Twitter.
Yeah.
And that sent the stock soaring yesterday. It was up like 27%. So that's a nice $600 or $700 million for him.
About that.
And the rich get richer. So then it was revealed.
Free market.
Then it was revealed this morning. Not only that, but he's going to be on the board of directors, and he is looking forward to making improvements to Twitter. And he's not talking about things like an edit button. He is. He doesn't think that Twitter is doing enough to promote free speech, and he thinks Twitter plays far too big a role in being what I would call the arbiters of truth. And that it's not fair in that regard. What do you think about these developments? It's all very interesting.
Well, we certainly know that he's not going to be canceled. I think that's not pretty.
I guess so. Yeah.
But the I think it was 9.2% stake in Twitter is interesting because it was actually done as a passive stake, Rob, which means that he was not going to have an active role in the day-to-day operations of the company. He was just simply an investor. It is unusual or a little bit odd to actually see someone who bought a passive stake in the company then go on to the board of directors roughly 24 hours later. But again, this is Elon Musk we're talking about. This is a person on a completely different plane, a person who is obviously extremely well known for, his unique accomplishments, his innovative ideas, whether it be SpaceX or whatever, or Tesla or whatever you wish to consider. He is obviously an eccentric individual, which he himself completely recognizes and is most likely ASD or on the autism spectrum. But he's also, because of that uniqueness and that innovative mind and that ability to think outside the box and create things that, some people might dream of, but they wouldn't either have the money, ability, knowledge, whatever, to actually construct it. And the fact that he does it and succeeds at it a lot of the time, he obviously is a big, as they call it, a big game player in general. So the fact that he's going to go on to Twitter, and you're right, I think that he's a libertarian politically for the most part. Yeah. He worked a bit with Donald Trump, as some may remember, when he was president, and he is a big defender of free speech, which I can certainly identify with, and I'm sure you can too, Rob. He's obviously looking at Twitter as something that he sees a lot of people being canceled or Twitter users being basically wiped out or permanently suspended. And if you really truly believe in free speech, which means you have to listen to the speech that you both agree with and disagree with, it doesn't work one way. It has to be a two-way street. I think he's looking at it as an opportunity as a fairly prominent, investor in Twitter, and he wants to, as on the board of directors, he wants to obviously ensure that free speech remains an integral component of Twitter. And who knows, it may actually lead to some prominent Twitter users being brought back on. I'm sure there's an ex-president of the United States who's probably looking at this interestingly.
You bet.
Who is planning to start his own forum as well. So who knows where it's all going to go.
Well. All right, Mike, thank you. Great to hear from you. Have a great week. Yeah, Michael Taube, syndicated columnist Michael Taube with us every week. Coming up after the news, the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. His name is Mike Schreiner, is the MPP for Guelph. We'll talk about the IPCC report on climate change and the Green Party of Ontario's election platform when we come back on City News.
Callahan from behind his own net. Moskowitz. There's a giveaway. Here's Byers. Shot right on. Mrazek has it.
Ottawa has, for the most part, carried the play in the last 3 or 4 games here, and this is when Barrie's got their chances on poor puck management, puck decisions right there. Ill-advised pass, not a good pass, a turnover, creates the first scoring chance and shot on net for the Barrie Colts in this game. This is what Ottawa's got to do better of tonight, is making sure that their puck management is good. They're crisp and they're solid when they have it.
That's the first action. Scores! The Barrie Colts draw first blood. It's Greg Such. Smith out there now for Ottawa. He's going to head in front of the net. Oh, dig it away. Scores! Dalton Smith tapped in front of the net. We are tied at 1. Back to the point. Callahan shot's blocked. And here comes McDonald with a head of steam. Shot scores! McDonald with the long shot. And the Barrie Colts take a 2-1 lead. Back to the point. CC walks. Shot scores! Cody Ceci.
It might have been deflected right away, right when he took the shot. Something changed on the way to the net.
It dipped as it got close to the net. I noticed that. And good cycling. Gus does a great job of being patient with the puck, bringing 2 guys to him.
And he'll win it back to the point. Ceci. Here's Prince. Traffic in front. Down low. Trying to get scores! With 24.1 seconds to go. An icing. Waved off at the last second. Bahena trying to track it down. Rolls deep into the Ottawa zone. Ceci to meet him. Trying to center it. Bouncing puck in the crease. Scores! With 8.7 to go. Mark Scheifele ties it at 3. Force McNeil to hustle back. Niederberger steers it away. Gustus right on it. Scores! Brad Gustafson from the boards. The Ottawa 67 advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. The little man comes up big for the Ottawa 67s.
He'll never score a bigger goal.
No, that's for sure.
This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, April 5th. Good morning, I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa, it's 9 degrees, partly cloudy skies. Over in Smiths Falls, temperature of 10 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. The Quebec government is reversing its decision to lift its mask mandate and will instead maintain the health order for indoor public spaces until at least the end of the month. Interim Public Health Director Dr. Luc Beaulieu told reporters today in Quebec City he changed his recommendation due to the rise in COVID-19 infections and hospitalizations across the province. The 86th edition of the Masters is set for this weekend, and just moments ago, Tiger Woods tells the media about his decision on whether or not to participate this year.
Well, as of right now, I feel like I am going to play. As of right now, I'm going to play 9 more holes tomorrow. My recovery has been good. I've been very excited about how I've recovered each and every day, and that's been the challenge.
The 46-year-old sustained serious injuries in a car crash in February of 2021 and has not played a match since before the incident. The Finance and Economic Development Committee has approved a CIP for the developers of a residential and retail complex in Vanier. The Community Improvement Program is a grant which gives the developer a break on property tax for 10 years. The Community Association says the proposed towers will add 3,200 residential units. And police are seeking witnesses to a shooting incident that happened in the 1400 block of Heron Road yesterday afternoon around 4:30 p.m. One individual was located with a gunshot wound and was transported to hospital by paramedics with severe but non-life-threatening injuries. Anyone with information is asked to contact OPS or Crime Stoppers. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Danielle Bain. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So again, the IPCC report, the latest report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says it's now or never. It's a now or never moment for the world to limit global warming. This, for example, is from BBC News. I was reading some of the news reports this morning. It says, first, the bad news. Even if all the policies to cut carbon that governments had put in place by the end of 2020 were fully implemented, the world would still warm by 3.2 degrees Celsius this century. That sort of temperature rise would see our planet hit by unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, and widespread water shortages. To avoid that fate, the world must keep the rise in temperatures at or under 1.5 degrees Celsius this century. But keeping temperatures down will require massive changes to energy production, industry, transport, and our consumption patterns. In other words, food, our diet, okay? It means that carbon emissions from everything we do, buy, use, or eat must peak by 2025 and tumble rapidly after that, reaching net zero by the middle of this century. So, some of the language there, massive changes, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages. It's all very doomy, gloomy. Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. He's the MPP for the riding of Guelph, and he joins me this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you today?
I'm good for now, I guess, Mike. 3 years from now, I don't know. What's your reaction to this latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change?
Well, there is a lot of doom and gloom in that report, but there's also some hope in that report. But let's just go to the doom and gloom for a second, because we're already experiencing just the tip of the iceberg of what climate breakdown is going to look like. So, almost 600 people died in the heat wave last summer in British Columbia alone. You've obviously seen the floods, the fires, et cetera. Here in Ontario, we had 6 First Nations communities had to be evacuated due to forest fires last summer. Southern and Eastern Ontario had some of the worst air quality in the world for a few days because of the forest fires in the north and the west, which, negatively affecting people with asthma. We're seeing, increase in tick-borne illnesses due to climate. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But let's talk about the good news for a second, because I believe Ontario is perfectly positioned to be the global leader in the new climate economy. Right now, we pump about $25-30 billion out of Ontario's economy to purchase fossil fuels from other jurisdictions. Let's keep that money in Ontario, generating prosperity in Ontario, creating new careers and better job opportunities for people in Ontario.
Right.
Especially when we have the opportunity to electrify our transportation system, have a mining to manufacturing supply chain. Let's make electric vehicles affordable for the average person. I mean, it costs me $5 to fill my electric car up overnight. Meanwhile, other people are paying $100 at the pump. So let's help people save money by making electric vehicles affordable.
Okay. When you say, if I could just, I just want to jump in there because you've said some interesting things. I'd just like to probe a little bit further.
Sure.
When you say that we spend this money importing fossil fuels into Ontario, what do you mean? And what would transformation mean? For example, Mike, like a place like Sarnia, which is kind of known as Petrochemical Alley, it's so important there. What does this look like then?
So in Sarnia, there's a huge opportunity. So right now, most of the plastic-based petrochemicals produced in Sarnia is made with oil and gas from Alberta. We can actually make it, and there's already plants in Sarnia doing it right now. We can take waste product from Ontario farms and forests and have those be the inputs into making things like plastics and other bioproducts, especially when you're thinking of things for the automotive sector, all the plastics in your cars and things. So there's huge opportunities to keep that money right here in Ontario. When you think of our largest source of climate pollution in Ontario is transportation. That we're buying, gasoline from all, none of that, very little of that, those fossil fuels come from Ontario. But we have one of the cleanest grids in the world right here in Ontario. We're selling excess electricity to the U.S. oftentimes at a loss. Why not put that into, the batteries of Ontario's cars and trucks, into transit vehicles, into electric bikes, which will save people a whole whack of money and reduce climate pollution at the same time. We have the solutions. The solutions are affordable. We just need a policy framework to make it happen.
What is your reaction to some of the recent announcements, especially when it comes to electric vehicles from the current government, from the Ford government? It's announced it, and I know I kind of know what you're going to say on this. Electric vehicle charging stations, for example, I think that was a $90 million announcement to put them at rest stops and these kinds of things. You're going to say, well, they shouldn't have tore them out in the first place. Am I right?
Well, they shouldn't have torn them out in the first place, Rob. But you know what? I'm going to tell you it's a green win. This is something...
That's a green win for you. Okay.
The EV manufacturing strategy that Ontario is finally rolling out after other jurisdictions have been eating our lunch is a green win. The rolling out of charging infrastructure is a green win. But you know what? We're going to need far more charges. Every building in Ontario, multi-residential building, should have electric chargers. Every parking facility should have electric chargers. We should be providing tax incentives for businesses. Any business where you're going to go for a while and shop, whether it's grocery shopping or sitting down having dinner or maybe buying some clothes, like they should all have charging stations there so you can charge your car while you're shopping.
Well, should it be free to charge your car?
Oh, no, I don't mind paying. It's still far cheaper to pay to charge. I mean, obviously, there's one of my favorite grocery stores. They offer free charging, so I go there and buy my groceries because I figure I'm going to support them. Yeah. But even if you're paying to charge, it is far cheaper than paying to fill up at the gas station.
Here's a question that I get from my listeners quite often, and maybe you have an answer for it. Right now, let's face it, I know the government has come along here and said we're going to lower the gas tax for 6 months, but that's kind of a one-time only deal. Gas taxes are a source of revenue for the province. The province then sends some of it to municipalities for investments in public transit. We do all of this electrification, okay? And we're not getting gas tax revenue anymore.
Yep.
What happens to that revenue for the government? What replaces that?
Yeah, so I think we're going to have to look at other revenue sources, and one possibility for those is commercial parking levies in like big box stores, malls, and things like that, where essentially they have these huge parking lots. They don't pay any extra for it. So there's been some proposals to say just put like a small little tiny fee to those companies for every one of those parking spaces. That would generate billions of dollars that could replace the gas tax. So we can look at some innovative solutions like that. But the bottom line is, for the average person out there, it is so much cheaper to not only fill up an electric vehicle, but even the maintenance costs. Like, you don't have oil changes anymore. Literally, I take my electric car in to get the tire, the winter tires put on and off a couple times a year, and that's it.
Okay. What sort of incentives do you think there should be at the consumer level for the purchase of electric vehicles?
You're up. So these should be very temporary, just to be able to scale up the industry and make electric vehicles affordable for the average person. What the Ontario Greens are saying is up to $10,000 for a new vehicle purchase, and there would be limits on the upper price level of it, because we don't want to offer people discounts on high-end electric vehicles. Okay. And we would offer a $1,000 rebate for the purchase of a used vehicle. There's a small program through Plug and Drive doing that right now. And we'd also offer a $1,000 rebate for electric bikes. Most people don't realize one of the fastest growing market segments in North America and in Europe right now is electric bikes, because they're a really affordable, easy way to get around, particularly for people who live in urban areas. That would help drive down the market price for electric vehicles to make them, affordable for the average person. The electric vehicle I drive, I don't want to promote any one, but right now it sells for $38,000, which, isn't cheap. But if you take the $5,000 rebate the federal government has, the $10,000 rebate that the Ontario Greens are proposing, and suddenly that's a $23,000 car. That's a pretty darn affordable car, especially one where it's only going to cost you, $5 to fill it up overnight.
Okay. Always nice to hear from you, Mike Schreiner. Glad to hear you're well.
Hey, yeah, you take care, Robin.
Hope we'll be speaking 3 years from now.
Let's turn that bad news into good news, eh?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, always good. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, Mike Schreiner is the leader, has been for many, many years now, of Ontario's Green Party and the MPP for the riding of Guelph. We'll be right back. Turn our attention to the federal budget. That's Thursday, and what they're looking for on the farm. This is City News.
In about 2017, I invited 9 other artists who I've been watching here in Almonte and area, who I really respect, and asked if they'd like to put a show on with me. And 2018 was our first show. It was absolutely wonderful. We did it again in 2019. And as you just mentioned, 2020, we had to cancel because of the pandemic. It was so successful. We weren't even sure initially if this was going to work, but we had 1,600 people show up in 2019 over 2 days. So I think there might be more this time around, which will be awesome. We'll all be wearing masks. Okay. But yeah, we're very much looking forward to it.
I mentioned to you off camera that Almonte really is one of my favorite towns to do a day trip. It's a wonderful way to just get out of the city. But there's something special about Almonte when it comes to the arts. It seems to be just a vibrant artistic community. Let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think makes Almonte so attractive to artists?
We don't know. Everybody who's here who is an artist, and there's a lot of us, we know that Almonte is all about the arts, all about culture. We have a newspaper called The Hum. It's all about entertainment and anything to do with arts and culture. We have Puppets Up coming up. We have so many festivals and theater plays. The Textile Museum, where we're going to be having our show, has different exhibits throughout the year, and it's all got to do with creativity. It's just a mecca for anything to do with the arts. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to live.
We're seeing, of course, some of the pieces, some of the art, the styles that we're going to see at this year's 10 Collective show. Tell me a little bit more about what people can expect. What sort of mediums will we see?
A wide range, and it's definitely the cliche saying, something for everybody. Multimedia, there's abstract, there's expressionism, representational art, high realism. If you looked at the names, people will see the names of the artists, some of them are very recognizable, and when you go to the website, you'd see for yourself as well. Very diverse styles, very different mediums, Yes, definitely something for everybody to just come in and enjoy. And there will be paintings that are available for sale, but you don't have to come and feel you have to buy.
Right.
It is definitely to show our work.
Eileen, how important are shows like this to artists like yourself and the other 9 artists that are participating?
It's quite important to get out.
Yeah.
Regardless of the pandemic, we are a very solitary group of people. And I mean, our art is always created in our studio with the lights over here and nobody comes in, and we're very solitary.
Opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Continuing now, speaking with people very interested in what Chrystia Freeland is going to reveal on Thursday. Federal Budget Day is Thursday. Agriculture, agri-food, a $140 billion industry in Canada, employing about 2 million people. It's a big deal and very top of mind for a lot of people when they go to the grocery store and they see higher prices. So, what do farmers want to see in the federal budget? Keith Currie, Vice President, Canadian Federation of Agriculture, is with us this morning on City News. He is in Collingwood, Ontario this morning. Good morning, Mr. Currie.
Good morning. How is everyone this morning?
Everyone is fine here in Ottawa, where everyone is waiting for the budget to come down, 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon. What does agriculture need to see in this budget?
Well, I think you hit it off the top, Rob, when you talked about people thinking about that whole food security aspect after the last 2 years of the pandemic. And certainly food security, especially from a food availability aspect, is something that's top of mind. And so we'd like to see the government invest in the agri-food industry as a whole and in rural Canada to make sure that investment in production at home is maintained and enhanced, not only for production of food here in Canada, but we also are an exporting nation. So how do we better enhance that? Because that's results in a big economic driver, as you pointed out, $140 billion annually. That's a lot of jobs. That's 1 in 8 people working in Canada. So we are the biggest employer. So how do we enhance that going forward? So, there's a number of different pillars we're looking at and ways to do that. And certainly one of our big programs that we have in agriculture is a national policy framework, and we really need to update it, enhance it, invest in it. Certainly this government is focused now, especially now that they have more or less a 4-year mandate on the environment, on climate change in particular. And so how do they actually turn to agriculture? I mean, we are 7% of the country's land base. So how do we partner together to drive climate change initiatives, carbon sequestration, things that we can do on the farm to further enhance reaching the goals and the targets they set? And certainly through this agriculture policy framework, which part of is a business risk management program, we think they can enhance that and expand it and invest in it to have those initiatives that farmers look for to continue to make that drive and push towards the climate change initiatives. So that's a big piece of what we're looking for, and along with other environmental initiatives that really increase our sustainability on the farm. I think when we see especially what happened in the West last year between the drought in a big part of Western Canada and then what happened in BC, those kinds of investments, proactive investments, ounce of prevention or pound of prevention is way better than having the cleanup mess you have to deal with. Yeah. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay. On the business risk management side, maybe describe the situation now and how you think it could be improved.
Well, we were fortunate last year. Minister Bibeau, the agriculture minister, gave us some improvements in our business risk management programs that have been stagnant for about 10 to 12 years. The federal government offered increased support through part of the program. Now, part of the way this program works is it's a 60-40 split between the federal government and the provinces. So the feds ponied up on their side, but not all of the provinces provinces did on their part. Here in Ontario, we're fortunate. Our Ontario government said, yes, we'll pony up our additional support, but not all provinces did. But what we're really looking for is, that, as I mentioned, that strategy. There's a program within it called Agri Recovery, and it's a disaster-based type of program. Okay. But it's slow in reaction, and it doesn't always get to where we need to go. And I think if we can enhance it and make it more accessible, because the provinces have to ask for it before it's actually initiated. So, there's Mother Nature is always playing with us all the time, and so across this country, we're such a vast country and large regions. We need a better responsive program that'll get to where we get to our producers when they need the money the most.
Okay. What about on the labor side? Temporary foreign workers, these sorts of things, just making sure farmers have the workers that they need. What can be done there?
Well, we've been chronically short in labor for a long time here in Canada, and we're almost 20,000 positions on farm go unfilled every year, and that's with the foreign labor that we get. So with some 60,000 workers coming into Canada every year, you can imagine what it would be like if we didn't have them. Mm-hmm. Minister Qualto did make an announcement yesterday about some new programming and what the feds are doing, looking at going forward, and we're certainly really happy about that. And it's that aspect of what she announced is for the value chain beyond agriculture, which was as bad as primary agriculture was. It was even worse in the value chain. So that was good news for us because we need the value chain to be healthy as well. But we're continuing to work with folks. I was on a meeting most of the day yesterday with our counterparts in Mexico, and we were talking about labor potential between our countries. And I know that the federal government and Ministry Bibeau again is looking at how do we enhance new Canadians and seasonal ag workers increasing in here in this country, and how can we encourage Canadians to look at especially over the last couple of years, if you've been displaced out of your job or for other reasons your business is closed, you can come into agriculture, have a look at what we're doing, and part of our ask to the government through the budget is looking at doing things like that, just investing in some in our colleges, in our universities, in our schools for more research and more training for all the people that need to service agriculture.
Keith Currie is with us here on City News, Vice President, Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Look, when I hear it from farmers, they're not pleased with the carbon tax that went up last Friday, the price on pollution, whatever. When it comes to the carbon tax, what can be done there, do you think? What should be done there?
Well, we're working with the federal government, and what we're looking for is an exemption especially on propane and natural gas. I mean, we are a northern country. Our livestock operations require heat in their barns, especially for poultry and pork in particular, but not limited to them. As well as, as I mentioned, Mother Nature is constantly playing havoc, and one year she'll give us a drought, and the next year it'll be excess moisture, and if we have excess moisture, we have to dry our grains, and that costs money. And the problem we have as farmers is that we have no measure of passing that cost on to the consuming public. If I'm a McDonald's or I'm a Walmart or pick your company and say I have a fuel surcharge that has gone up because of the price increase last Friday, I'll put another 4, 5, 6 cents, whatever it takes on each product going out the door to offset those costs, so the consumer pays. As farmers, we don't get that option. We have to pay it, and it continues to erode into our bottom line. And, we're willing to do our part, and we don't want to leave the impression that we should get off scot-free as far as looking at how we fight climate change and come up with climate change solutions. But when leaders set targets, like, for example, they did last May in Scotland, they're not really thinking about the practical implementation on the ground. And, Canada's agriculture is about 8% or 9% of the overall problem with carbon greenhouse gas emissions, but we're 20% of the solution, and nobody's capitalizing on that. So we're asking for some consideration in how they're pricing this pollution, because we also don't have any other option with respect to combustible engines on the farm. Our equipment predominantly all runs on diesel and some of it on gasoline.
Yeah.
We don't have a foreseeable option to go electric or something alternative. So we're stuck with doing what we're doing, and the less I can go over the field, the better I like it, whether there's a price on carbon or not, because that's an economic benefit for me. So work with us and give us the breaks we need, and take the money you are getting and put it into an initiative that enhances climate change initiatives rather than just in the general coffers. So, we are having those conversations, and we're looking at ways that we can make that happen. We haven't got it nailed yet, but we're in the room.
Okay. One final thing. I know that the government is constantly announcing initiatives for rural broadband. A lot of our farmers, of course, their farms are in rural areas. How is that going? Expanding rural broadband to farming communities. What's your sense of things, Keith Currie?
Well, there has been some movement on that front. I mean, part of our ask through this budgeting process also is, lowering the threshold for eligible products in the federal connectivity funding, and allowing bundling of multiple projects so that some of the small service providers out there can actually access it. And the other part of this is establish a basic minimum standard for service and rates. I mean, our rates for rural Ontario are ridiculously high. The CRTC used to have a high-cost service area fund. That's not available anymore, so they need to reestablish that. But the other aspect that would not cost them anything is that currently what's happening is in order to do the expansion, you have to have access to what they call spectrum. And right now, the big telecoms have all the spectrum, but they're not using it all. And there are some small providers that can't get their hands on the small spectrum, or on the spectrum.
This program is brought to you by